Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
This professor is stern, is what Leo and pretty much everyone else in the class thought, as automatically they straightened their spines and maintained absolute decorum. Nobody wanted to be the target of the professor's ire, and hence everyone tried their best to not spook him. Professor David seemed to appreciate this atmosphere, as with a curt nod, he began his class. Good afternoon, all. I am David Meninges, and I am your professor for the Magic Theory class, as well as the head supervisor for all first-year students. I expect 100% attendance in all my classes, and I expect you to arrive 5 minutes before the class begins, he said in a deep, peculiar voice as he gestured towards the door. As you can see, I do not have a tolerance for latecomers, so if you're here after me, it's best to keep walking and not try to enter my class. That being said, enough time is wasted already. Let's begin with today's education, David said, as he turned his body from facing the door to facing the blackboard. Magic theory is the fundamental behind how everything functions in the universe. How spells are made, how meditation manuals are made, how complex mana machineries are made, alchemy, blacksmithing, you name it, and I can show you the application of magic theory in it. It's one of the absolute fundamentals of the modern world, and hence its education is of paramount importance, David explained, as Leo immediately found himself engrossed in his teachings. Having lost his memory, Leo found his curiosity for learning enhanced these days, as he felt like an empty sponge that wanted to soak everything that was available around him. That being said, the basis of magic theory is mana, which is why we begin with the question on the board. What is mana? David said as he turned back towards the class, scanning the crowd until his eyes landed on Leo sitting peacefully in the third row. Skyshard, get up, tell me what mana is? David commanded, as for a moment Leo felt confused on how the professor knew his name and face already. Standing up, Leo looked at him in confusion, as without his memories he had no proper context to construct a proper response, which was why he could only apologize in shame. I'm sorry, Professor. I'm not very knowledgeable in this subject. I cannot explain what mana is, Leo replied, his cheeks flushing slightly red as he candidly admitted his shortcomings. The reaction from the crowd was muted. Some giggled. Others looked at him with indifference. However, none seemed to think it was a particularly big deal. However, all this changed once the professor began humiliating Leo. You don't know what mana is? You're a warrior that managed to survive the brutal assassin entrance exam to enroll into this academy, but you don't know what mana is? You must be quite lucky to make it this far with such a dumb brain, David insulted, as now the class burst into soft giggles. There was no need for such personal attacks. However, it was clear by the crazed look in David's eyes that he had a vendetta against Leo that he was unwilling to let go of from the very first day. Guess intelligence doesn't get passed down in genes. You have to actually study for it. Must be the reason behind why the most brilliant scientists of our times are never from the 6 great clans, David said, as he rolled his eyes around to check out every student that belonged to the great clans, as he defiantly stared them down. Well, this is an advanced class, Mr. Skyshard. We don't pamper kids here. If you don't know what mana is, I suggest you head to the library and expand your knowledge base before attending my classes. Till then, get out, David said coldly, as Leo simply stared at him in confusion. He had not expected such hostility from the professor today, nor did he understand the reason behind it. This was supposed to be a place of learning, and he had been nothing but respectful. There was no reason to kick him out of class. However, the professor seemed to be hell-bent on doing it regardless. Are you deaf, Skyshard? Or just incredibly dumb that you can't register simple instructions at once? I said, get out, David reiterated while pointing towards the door, as this time Leo began to move, his anger boiling under his breath, as he controlled his emotions. He did not give the professor an angry look before heading out. No, he did not give him the satisfaction of showing that he managed to agitate him, and instead he walked out with his head down as some of his classmates laughed at his retreating figure. Once outside, Leo gnashed his teeth and kicked his leg against the hallway wall as he tried to figure out where he went wrong. However, upon self-reflection, he realized that there was nothing that he could have done otherwise. It was clearly the professor who was biased against him. However, Leo did not even remember having done anything that would have remotely pissed him off. After kicking Leo out of the class, David immediately turned his attention to Su Yang as he passed on the same question to him. Getting up lazily from his slouch position on the last bench, Su Yang looked down on David with indifferent eyes as he cooked up a half-assed reply. Mana is the force that powers magic. It flows freely through the rainbow stream in the universe, which can be visualized as a wave of energy that covers countless planets and galaxies. Beings born within this rainbow stream have learned how to harness mana and use it to perform magic, which is the fundamental to becoming a warrior, he said, as while it was not an incorrect answer, it wasn't a perfect one either. However, as if not impressed by his answer at all, David began shaking his head in disappointment as he grasped the opportunity to berate Su Yang. Wow, we have another mentally retarded student in class here. Seems like we're going 2 for 2 this year, David said, as he purposefully began humiliating Su Yang. I could have asked this question to a 4-year-old and probably gotten the same reply. Mr. Yang, it makes me wonder if your brain has stopped evolving since you were 4. Perhaps you were dropped on your head as a child, David said, as the whole class began laughing at his joke. However, while Leo took the insults with his head down, Su Yang was not the type to do the same. He smiled as he stared defiantly in the professor's eyes, which only irked the professor even more. I'm glad you find this funny. I would laugh on myself too if I were you, David said, his tone slightly irritated now, as the smile on Su Yang's face widened even more. Oh, but you wish you were me, professor. You wish you were. But you're not. You're an inferior born, and you'll never become a transcendent level warrior, much less a monarch. And neither will your kids, because they share your filthy blood. You can school me all you want a day, but remember to keep your insults measured. I'm not as tolerating as Skyshard, and I may just come back 10 years in the future to end you in your bloodline for a silly joke that you made today. So I would smile even broadly than how you are today. If I were you, since my time in this universe might be more limited than I imagined, Su Yang threatened, as David's gaze darkened at this blatant disrespect. Su Yang struck a nerve with his insult today, a nerve that hit David right where it hurt the most, and the anger was visible on his face. Out! Get out! He screamed, his face turning a bright shade of red, as Su Yang defiantly walked out from in front of him. At that moment, it took all the willpower that David had in his body to not lift his hand on a student. Because if this was not the academy grounds they were in right now, he would have unquestionably killed Su Yang today, right where he stood. Leo was surprised to see Su Yang follow him outside the classroom. He had been about to leave when the class erupted into another round of giggles, followed by an abrupt silence, until the professor's furious shout rang out once more. Get out! This time, it was Su Yang who stepped out. Having no idea what Su Yang had done wrong, Leo looked at him, confusion evident in his eyes. For a brief moment, Su Yang met his gaze with a frown, but then, as if flipping a switch, his usual smug smile returned, and he let out a loud chuckle. Why are you looking at me like that, Skyshard? Did you really think you were the only one he had a vendetta against? Su Yang asked, his choice of words leaving Leo utterly perplexed. Vendetta. Of course it's a vendetta, Su Yang scoffed. We're not the first batch David has taught, and every single year, without fail, he targets the top talents in the class, humiliating them daily just to make the less gifted students feel like the universe is a fair and equal place. Leo narrowed his eyes as Su Yang continued, his tone laced with amusement. Senior brother Du Liang already warned me about his biased behavior, which is why I came prepared with a response in case he decided to poke me today. And that dumb motherfucker did poke me. So, naturally, I put him in his place, Su Yang said, his grin widening. So that's how it was. Leo murmured, realization settling in. For a moment, I couldn't understand why I was kicked out for doing absolutely nothing. But it turns out, he just hates talent. Su Yang shrugged, completely unbothered. Anyone without talent hates those who have it. Skyshard. That's how the universe works. The commoners despise the 6 great clans because we only intermarry amongst ourselves, keeping our bloodlines pure. But do you know what happens to the clan members who marry out of love outside of the great clans? Without waiting for a response, Su Yang answered his own question. They face heavy social stigma. They struggle with cultural differences. The commoners reject them, unable to accept their refined upbringing, and their lives become an endless cycle of squabbling and regret. Their children are born weaker, lacking the clan support, and they don't receive the same training or privileges as a noble heir. In the end, those who marry for love either abandon their partners to return to the clan or die bitter and disillusioned. Su Yang crossed his arms, his voice taking on an air of finality. The world of nobles and commoners is like oil and water, Skyshard. We may exist within the same academy, much like oil and water in a single vessel, but we can never mix. Oil will always rise above water. Yet some people refuse to accept this fundamental truth of the universe. His gaze sharpened, his words carrying an unmistakable edge. You and I, we are oil. But unlike you, Skyshard, I wear my heritage with pride. My grandfather is the Sioux family god, and his blood runs through my veins. So I'll be damned if I let some second-rate teacher insult me in class. His words left Leo with much to think about. Before this class, Leo did not expect teachers to have biases against the students. However, perhaps he was being too naive. Just like how there would be a few instructors who would be blown away by Leo and Su Yang's talent and favor them in class. There would be some that dislike them for the same. There were all kinds of people in the universe, and it was a dumb choice to drop one's guard against any of them. Come on, Skyshard. Let's head over to the practical combat arena. This is a good opportunity for both of us to spar without 1,000 eyes on us, Su Yang urged, as Leo looked towards Su Yang with his eyebrow raised. On a deep level, he did not mind sparring with Su Yang today. Hell, he even felt excited for it. However, without knowing how to circulate mana or use his skills, he felt hesitant to head into a fight, which he knew he could not win. What? You're too scared to fight me? Su Yang asked, as he sensed Leo's hesitation. However, Leo only shook his head in response. No, I'm not scared. Let's go, he said as Su Yang slapped his back hard. Now that's what I expect from my rival. Ha ha, this spar is going to be legendary, Su Yang said, as both of them grinned and jogged their way towards the practical combat arena. Leo was not naive. He did not let fleeting emotions cloud his judgment. And although it appeared as if he had agreed to spar with Su Yang on a whim, that was far from the truth. From the moment he set foot in the academy, Leo had known that, sooner or later, he would have to spar against other students, many of whom could likely wipe the floor with him. To avoid that fate, he first needed to understand where he stood in the class hierarchy and gauge his own strength. After the morning's physical training session, Leo found himself genuinely intrigued. His body possessed remarkable endurance, yet he had no memory of ever training it. Despite that gap in knowledge, the results spoke for themselves. His physique was far superior to that of an average human. Just this morning, he had run over 40 kilometers without stopping, maintaining speeds that would be impossible even for professional marathon runners. Hence, it was clear that his physical capabilities exceeded the limits of peak human performance. And that was why he agreed to spar with Su Yang, for he was desperate to know just how strong he truly was. As the duo stepped into the practical combat facility, they were greeted by the in-house instructor, Major Hen, who seemed perplexed by their early arrival. Why are you boys here so early? Class doesn't start for another hour and a half, the Major remarked, his gaze shifting between the two students. Su Yang stepped forward to answer, his usual arrogance tempered by an air of respect. Major, this is Leo Skyshard, and I'm Su Yang. We're both Monarch-level talents, and we were politely dismissed from Professor David's class earlier today. Since we have some free time, we'd like to spar and stretch our muscles a bit. It would be an honor if you could officiate the bout. Leo raised a brow. Unlike his usual brashness, Su Yang's tone carried an unexpected level of decorum. He spoke to the Major with genuine respect, something that didn't go unnoticed. Major Hen studied them for a moment before exhaling through his nose, a small smirk forming on his lips. Oh, what the hell? Why not? This should be an interesting fight to watch. He crossed his arms and gave them a firm look. Gear up. And remember, no targeting the vital organs, eyes, or groin. Unless you want me to personally beat the crap out of both of you. Suyang bowed slightly in gratitude. Thank you, Major. Wasting no time, he turned and rushed toward the weapons rack in the corner, his enthusiasm evident. Leo followed suit, his fingers skimming over the selection until he found a dagger that felt comfortable in his grip. The two combatants stood at opposite ends of the sparring ring, clad in protective gear, as mandated by the Academy. Leo adjusted the arm pads, knee guards, and light body armor strapped to his frame, shifting slightly to test his mobility. His helmet fit snugly, obscuring part of his vision, but he ignored the discomfort. Since regulations demanded that he must wear a helmet, this one was the best fit, although it blocked part of his vision slightly. Across from him, Suyang grinned as he flexed his fingers around the grip of a training sword, its edge dulled but still formidable. Leo, on the other hand, took a different approach. He strapped a utility belt around his waist, filling it with daggers, their hilts snugly secured within easy reach. Two more were drawn into his hands, their familiar weight bringing a sense of reassurance, as he mentally prepared himself for the battle ahead. It doesn't matter if I lose, I just need to understand what this body is capable of, Leo thought to himself, as he let out a series of deep breaths, as if to instinctively calm his heart rate and increase his focus. Planning to throw them at me? Or do you actually know how to use them up close? Suyang asked, eyeing the daggers in his hand, as Leo ignored his comment, instead shifting into a ready stance as he prepared for combat. Major Hen observed them for a moment before raising his voice. Combatants, take your starting positions. Leo exhaled, steadying his nerves. Suyang, ever the showman, rolled his shoulders lazily before pointing his sword toward Leo. Try not to embarrass yourself too quickly, Sky Shard. Leo resisted the urge to retort. Words wouldn't help him here. Begin, the Major said, as the moment the signal was given. Suyang exploded forward. Leo barely had time to process the movement before a blur of sword slash came screaming toward him. His instincts roared, and he flung himself sideways just in time. Whoosh! The massive sword slash sliced through the air where his torso had been, missing him by a hair's breadth. A cold sweat trickled down his spine. Had he been even a fraction of a second slower, the hit would have caved in his ribs despite the armor. But before he could even recalibrate, Suyang was already on him. Oh shit! Leo barely managed to raise his daggers in time as the next strike came. Clang! The impact rattled through his arms like a shockwave. His right-hand dagger flew from his grasp, spinning through the air before clattering against the arena floor. His left dagger remained, but his grip was shaky. Suyang's eyes gleamed. You show too many openings, Sky Shard. Then he attacked. One strike, then another, then another. Leo blocked the first few, but it was a downhill battle from there. Suyang's relentless offense was overwhelming, his strikes fast, precise, and filled with raw power. Thud! A heavy thud landed against Leo's ribs, forcing him to stagger back, barely maintaining his footing. Clap! A sharp hit clipped his shoulder, causing his balance to waver. Bam! A downward strike slammed against his armored thigh, nearly sending him to his knees. Left, right, center. Blow after blow rained down, the blunt end of Suyang's sword battering him mercilessly. Leo gritted his teeth as the realization set in. He was being completely outclassed. Every time he tried to retaliate, Suyang's sword was already there, knocking his attacks aside as if they were child's play. It wasn't just that Suyang was stronger. It wasn't just that he was faster. It was the way he fought, with the effortless confidence of someone who wasn't even taking the fight seriously. As if Leo wasn't a threat. As if this was all just entertainment to him. A deep frustration bubbled within Leo as another brutal strike landed against his side, forcing him back once more. His grip tightened around the one dagger he had left. He had to do something. However, all his fighting spirit amounted to nothing in front of Su Yang's supremacy, as one last attack by his opponent to his chin sent him crashing towards the floor, with stars circling before his eyes. The spar was over, as Hen intervened and declared Su Yang as the winner. "Stop! Winner Su Yang," Major Hen said, as a deep frown spread over his face. "Yang, goddammit boy, your swordsmanship is beautiful. Well done. Sky Shard, you fight like a moron. What the hell was this stance? Why did you not use your combat skills to get out of the tough spot you found yourself in? What were you even doing?" Major Hen said, as after praising Su Yang, he absolutely admonished Leo. "Is this kid really a monarch-level talent? What clan are you from, boy? What's the story here, son?" Hen asked, alternating his gaze between Leo on the floor and Su Yang as he waited for an explanation. "He's supposed to be a monarch-level talent, but I don't know why he fights so poorly, Major. I came here expecting a war, but I found myself fighting against a baby," Su Yang said, as Leo struggled back to his feet, his bloody nose and bruised cheeks a sorry sight to watch. I don't have my memories, Major. I've forgotten everything about myself but my instincts. I don't remember what skills I have, or how I used to fight. I don't even remember how strong I'm supposed to be," Leo replied candidly, as both Su Yang and Major Hen were taken aback instantly by his response. "Moo," both of them said at once, as if something just made sense in their heads, as letting out a deep sigh. Su Yang shook his head from side to side. "Just when I thought I found myself a rival, life plays a cruel prank on me again." "Fuck," he cursed, his anger genuine, as he seemed to be pissed that Leo did not have his memories on him. Major Hen mumbled, as he scratched his head and shook it from side to side in disappointment. "I don't know why they do this to their own kids. The Mu clan is full of crazies," Major Hen said, as after contemplating for a while, he placed a sympathetic hand over Leo's shoulder and pointed towards the exit door. "Go to the teacher's staff room on floor 2 and look for a female instructor called Muiyin Fei. Tell her about your memory loss and tell her that it's Major Hen who has sent you. She's the specialist at the Academy for Mind Control Magic and Memory Loss. Perhaps she can recover some bits of your memory that will help you become more of your usual self again," Hen said, as he gave Leo's shoulders a good squeeze. "Thank you," Major Leo said, giving him a thankful bow, as the Major gave him a soft smile. "Become stronger fast, my boy, else the rest of your class will eat you up," he said, as Leo took his advice to heart. "This isn't over, Sky Shard. Today's fight doesn't count. I want to face you at your best, so you better get back to your peak as fast as you can," Su Yang demanded, as Leo gave him a simple thumbs up. Internally, he did not view Su Yang as a rival. Hell, he did not even care what the bloke thought about him. However, having fought him today, Leo got an understanding of just how weak he was compared to the best student of this year, and the gap between them was simply massive. Su Yang had defeated him today without so much as breaking a sweat, and that in itself told Leo all he needed to know about where he stood in the academy hierarchy. As Leo made his way toward the staff room, his mind lingered on the aftermath of his fight with Su Yang. Revealing his memory loss to Su Yang had been a gamble, a weakness exposed, a vulnerability laid bare. But in the end, something good had come from it. Major Hen had given him a lead, a professor who might have the ability to help him recover his lost memories. And if it actually worked out, Leo felt like it could be a game changer. If I can recover my memory without relying on the ones who erased it, then I can take back control of my life. That thought alone filled him with a renewed sense of determination. Optimistic, he reached his destination with a soft smile tugging behind his bruised lips. Taking a steady breath, he stood outside the staff room and calmly called the name of the instructor given to him. Instructor Muiyin Fei. He waited, arms relaxed at his sides, trying to appear unaffected. But the moment the door opened and she stepped out, the air in his lungs turned to stone. He knew her. Those short hair, olive skin, those stern eyes. She was the one who had given him the orientation tour. She was the one who had slipped him the second chit. and now she was standing before him, eyebrow raised, as if she hadn't been a part of the group that had wiped his memories. A sharp chill ran through him. Of all the people Hen could have sent him to, why did it have to be her? These were not the circumstances under which he had wanted to meet her. Yes? How may I help you today, student? She said, her voice calm, as looking into her prying eyes, Leo's body tensed, his feet taking an instinctive step back. That, he stammered, words fumbling over themselves before he inhaled sharply and forced himself to steady. He couldn't afford to look weak. Not now. Lifting his chin slightly, he met her gaze, his voice strong despite the unease coiling in his chest. Major Hen sent me to see you, ma'am. He said you could help me with my memory loss. He said, as he gauged her reaction. N? How long before your next lecture starts? Faye said, as she glanced at the watch on her wrist. A little over an hour, ma'am, Leo replied, as she nodded and gestured for him to follow her. Come over to my room. It's not a guarantee whether I can help you out or not, but I'll give it a shot, Faye said, as she began walking towards her room, with Leo in tow. Tap, tap, tap. Faye's boots clicked against the polished tiles in a steady, rhythmic beat. Unlike Leo, who moved without a sound, her stride was practiced, disciplined, and predictable. In a fight, he could probably hear her coming from 100 meters away. But right now, as he followed behind her, the sharp echo of her footsteps was the least of his concerns. Will she try to harm me once we're alone? Will she actually help me regain my memory? Am I finally going to get some of the answers I've been searching for? Doubt churned inside him, each step bringing a fresh wave of uncertainty, his heart and mind being tangled in a mess of emotions. Yet, despite everything, despite knowing she was part of the group that had erased his memories, he somehow did not feel threatened in her presence. Instinct told him that Muiyin Fei held no killing intent towards him. But instinct alone wasn't enough to trust her. His fingers brushed over the concealed dagger tucked within his uniform, the same one he had stashed secretly after the sparring session. It was his last resort, a plan B for if things went sideways. Soon, they arrived at the teacher's quarters. Faye stopped before her door, pressing her palm against the biometric scanner. The lock clicked open, and she stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter first. Thank you, Leo said politely, stepping inside without hesitation. As soon as he crossed the threshold, Faye followed, the door sealing shut behind her with an audible WOSH. Leo's eyes flickered to the lock mechanism. It was air-sealed. The moment the door shut, the security system automatically re-engaged, indicating that even exiting the room was going to require biometric verification, meaning he was locked in until Faye let him out. There goes my plan to run out if things go wrong, Leo realized, as although he did not show the panic on his face, his heart already skipped a beat or two. So, did Hen really send you? Or was that just an excuse to find me? Faye said, as she broke the awkward silence. However, what took Leo aback was the apparent shift in her tone. Gone was the smooth, formal voice she had used in public. Now, her voice was lighter, shriller, more feminine. As if, now that they were alone, she no longer felt the need to maintain her disciplined facade. Yes, it was Major Hen who sent me. But truth be told, I was searching for you ever since you slipped me the note on day one, but I was unable to find you, Leo admitted, as Faye nodded. Well, I was expecting you to find me. And had you been more attentive and looked at my name tag during orientation, perhaps you could have found me sooner, Faye pointed out as she took a subtle jibe at Leo. I'm glad you are calm, sitting here before me, as I'm sure you have a million questions in your mind. However, before you voice them, let me tell you, I won't be able to answer most of them currently, so don't be disappointed when I refuse to answer most of your doubts. Faye said, as her words caused Leo to clutch his fists in anger. What do you mean you won't be able to answer many of my questions? Who the fuck are you? And where the fuck are my memories? Was what he wanted to scream at the moment. However, knowing full well that aggression was going to get him nowhere, he barely managed to repress his anger. I understand, but instead of me asking the questions, why don't you tell me what you can tell me, so that I don't lose out on any information that you are allowed to give me today, Leo said, as he pushed the ball in her court, somehow holding on to some semblance of patience. A smart choice. We can do it that way, too, Faye said, as a soft smile played on her lips, as she began thinking about how best to explain the situation Leo found himself in. For a while, there was pin-drop silence in the room. Then, Faye finally began with a recap. Your real name is Leo Skyshard, your birth planet is Earth, and you were widely known as Earth's best assassin and Earth's greatest warrior, back when you hunted under your moniker The Boss, she began, as her lips curved into an unnatural smile when she spoke the last sentence. You were always an arrogant brat, which was clear in your naming sense. Like, who actually calls themselves the boss? That's cringe and stupid. However, you actually had the talent to live up to your ridiculous name, which I personally find very impressive, she said, as it was clear she had veered off track to make this comment. However, it looked like she could not help herself. Your memory loss was your own decision. Nobody forced you to do it. However, you saw the merits of this process and decided to go through with it for the sake of the mission and the safety of your family, Faye said, as it was at this point that Leo widened his eyes in surprise and found his patience finally broken, as he couldn't stay silent. Wait. So you're telling me that I voluntarily gave up my memories and threw myself into a brutal entrance exam where I could have died, all while holding nothing but a vague note in my hand? I can't possibly be that dumb. And for what? What mission? What about my family? Leo's voice shook with frustration, his hands trembling at his sides. None of this made any sense. Instead of answers, Faye had only given him more maddening questions. However, Faye remained unfazed. Like I said, I can't answer most of your questions. And what mission? And what about my family? Happen to be two of those questions. She crossed her arms, leaning slightly against the desk. As for I can't possibly be that dumb. PSSSH. Let's just say it's a blessing you don't remember your past self, because in all my years, I have never met a more arrogant, self-righteous twat than you. Leo's left eye twitched. That was not the response he was expecting. Faye smirked, clearly enjoying his discomfort. We warned you the entrance test would be brutal. But do you know what you said? She tilted her head, her tone turning mocking. And I quote, "The boss laughs in the face of danger." Leo winced as secondhand embarrassment washed over him. Was I really that arrogant? He wondered. But more importantly, why couldn't Faye answer the most important questions? Oh, bullshit. Why can't you tell me what the mission is? And why is my family involved in this mess? His patience snapped, anger surging to the surface, as Faye let out a deep sigh. I can't tell you, Leo, because the moment I do, you will no longer be able to remain a regular student at this academy, one whose presence doesn't raise suspicion. Her voice lost its usual teasing edge, turning serious. You might have already figured it out, but the only reason you were able to pass the academy's psychological evaluation without raising any alarms was because you did not have access to your memories. If you had them, you could have never lied your way past the lie detector and could never enroll as a student here. However, in case you don't know, those evaluations are not a one-time thing. They happen every 12 months. So you will have to pass another at the end of your first year, and again when you graduate. Leo's stomach sank as Faye continued. If I give you the answers that you seek today, you will have no chance of passing your next psychological evaluation. You will undoubtedly expose yourself. And when that happens, the mission you chose to undertake. She shook her head. It will be over before it even begins. Leo let out a strangled breath, his fingers tangling in his hair. This was impossible. An impossible situation with no way out. I know it's difficult. However, it's the path you chose for yourself. So please, for now, forget about the why behind this situation and focus on what you're supposed to do next, Faye said, as Leo buried his head in his hands and stayed there for a while. And what am I supposed to do next? He asked, his head still hanging low, as Faye began explaining his own vision back to him. You're supposed to graduate from this academy as the top student of your class. However, that alone is not your goal. Your goal is to somehow help Rodova clinch the #1 spot in the university rankings once again, toppling Geneva as you plan to dominate the circuits. You have set that as your goal, because you know that a dominating performance at the circuits will establish you as a household name amongst the top adventure guilds and clans in the universe, who will recruit you with big promises. And for the sake of the mission, it's absolutely necessary that you find your way into one of the best assassination guilds in the universe. The Black Serpents, Faye said, as Leo finally looked up and made eye contact with her. Please tell me, at least the reason behind all this effort is worth it? Leo asked as Faye nodded sympathetically. You're doing this to save your family, and in a way the whole universe. There is no bigger noble cause. But if that's not enough, then you're also doing this to save your own life. You're a wanted fugitive, and unless you achieve your goals exactly as you map them, you'll be captured and killed in the most brutal of ways, Faye said, as listening to her words Leo fell silent once again. The stakes were massive, almost too big to even fathom. Yet the only way out was diving even deeper, giving him no choice but to accept his fate as is. What else can you tell me? I mean, there has to be something, because as things stand, I'm going absolutely crazy. I don't even remember how to sense mana. My dreams at night are blank because there's literally nothing but fog over my memories, and I don't remember anything about how to fight. Before I came here, Su Yang pummeled my face into a pulp, and I'm more than sure that almost everyone else in the academy can too. If I don't regain at least some of my combat potential again, Leo complained, as Mui Yin Fei gave him another look of sympathy. Well, now, this is something that I can help you with. And it was something I was supposed to give you back on the very first day. However, if only someone had bothered to read my name tag, we could have done this much sooner. Faye said, as she stood up from her seat and walked towards her room wall, where she began secretly tempering with the space around it. For a second, Leo found his vision turn hazy, as he could not perceive the world around him at all, until it returned suddenly, when Mui Yin Fei took her seat before him yet again. What? What just happened? He mumbled in confusion, as Faye only chuckled to his face, but offered no explanation. Then, she put forward the object in her hand, which looked like a simple beanie cap, meant to cover one's ears and head, however, with a lot of electrodes sticking from it. On the side of the beanie was written memory disk, number 4 techniques and fights, and, just looking at the object, Leo felt a vague sense of familiarity from it. I've seen this before, he said as Faye nodded. You already have regained memories from memory disk number 1, which was language and math. Without it, you would be no different than a baby who did not understand a word being spoken around it, Faye said, as she gestured for him to put it on. The process of memory transfer is painful, so dig deep and make sure you don't bite your tongue off. Also, while you will regain your knowledge about your existing skill moveset and how to execute them, you will still need to practice them a few times before you return to peak proficiency. So you will still have to work on it a bit, Faye warned, as Leo nodded and placed the beanie over his head, while also mentally preparing himself for the pain to come. Ready. Leo barely had time to nod before Faye placed her palm atop the beanie, her fingers spreading across the fabric with practiced precision. A faint hum resonated from the device as she channeled her mana into it, slowly at first, then with increasing intensity. Thin, glowing threads of blue energy seeped from her fingertips, intertwining with the embedded electrodes on the beanie's surface. The moment her mana fully connected with the device, pain, a violent surge tore through Leo's skull, sending his nerves into overdrive. His back arched, fingers digging into the chair's armrests as his entire body locked up. A white-hot pulse hammered through his mind, as if someone had taken a branding iron and was forging memories straight into his consciousness. And then, the floodgates broke open. A torrent of images, sensations, and knowledge crashed into Leo's mind, his consciousness struggling to keep up with the sheer volume of information being forcefully restored. So that's how you circulate mana. So that's how you draw in mana from your surroundings. The first pieces of his past slotted into place, answering fundamental questions about mana control and manipulation before the true depth of his combat knowledge surfaced. Leo had mastered 7 core moves, each designed for a different battlefield scenario. Though vastly different in application, they complemented one another seamlessly, forming the foundation of his assassination skill set. The first technique to resurface was Vanish, a stealth-based move that allowed him to turn completely invisible. The technique worked best when blending into darkness, but Leo had refined it to the point where he could even disappear in broad daylight. By manipulating the mana in his surroundings, he could bend light itself, creating a perfect illusion of non-existence. Then came the Kill Strike, a technique meant to ensure the absolute lethality of an assassination. The move worked by channeling a pulse of volatile mana into an enemy's body upon stabbing them. The moment the blade pierced, the mana detonated inside the target, causing instantaneous internal bleeding and organ failure. While a dagger wound might be survivable, no one could endure an explosion within their own body. Next was the Mirror World, a cloning technique that allowed him to summon up to 100 identical copies of himself. The technique could be used in two ways: illusions, which serve as perfect decoys to mislead an opponent, or physical clones, which could attack and defend just like the real Leo. The flexibility of the technique made it an invaluable tool in both combat and deception. Following that was Shadowbind, a restraining move designed to incapacitate targets without the need for lethal force. Using Mana-Forged chains, Leo could wrap his enemies in powerful bindings, preventing their escape or counterattack. It was an ideal move for control, ensuring his prey had no chance to resist. Next came Full Counter. It was a skill which helped him send any magical/physical attack coming his way back towards the sender with twice the force. However, executing it needed extreme timing and precision. One slight mistake, and the whole move could fail, which was why it needed to be used with caution. Then came Blade Switch, a move that allowed Leo to throw a dagger and instantly teleport to its location. The technique created a blink-like effect, enabling him to reposition in battle within human speed. He could use it to close distances, escape a dangerous situation, or launch an unexpected attack from a new angle. Finally, his mind unlocked the knowledge of parallel processing, a technique that temporarily merged the processing power of his conscious and subconscious minds. This move was responsible for the moments when he perceived the world to slow down around him, giving him an immense advantage in battle. However, it came at an enormous cost. His brain consumed energy 100 times faster than normal to maintain the state, and his muscles had to keep up with the rapid signals, pushing his body beyond its natural limits. The move was his most powerful ace. However, its overuse had the potential to leave him completely incapacitated, a price too high if misused. As all this knowledge resurfaced in Leo's mind, he felt an odd sense of satisfaction, but also immense pain. His skull throbbed violently, as if someone had rammed a drill into his brain, forcing each memory back into place, while his entire body trembled under the weight of the forced recollection. Having years of knowledge being crammed into one's brain within seconds was not a good feeling, and Leo had no question in his mind that a weaker man would have passed out from it. However, he held on, as the final bits of knowledge began to be transferred to his brain on how to actually make use of his techniques in practical combat scenarios, as he received snippets of himself in past battles where he used the moves in one way or another. "Godash!" he screamed, as a mouthful of spittle escaped his face, landing on the floor below. He was approaching his limits and quickly felt like he could not take any more knowledge for the day anymore. "We are 96% done. Just hold on for a few more seconds," Mui Fei told him, as listening to her voice Leo somehow held on till the end, as the device finally powered off, having completed its function. "Good job not passing out. Some of your memories would have been lost forever if you did," she said, as she removed the steaming beanie from his head and ruffled his hair in joy. "Lost forever? How about you warn me about such things before we start the procedure next time?" Leo snapped back, angry, as Faye let out a prideful smile. "So, did you get the knowledge of your move set back? What do you think of it?" Faye asked, as for a moment Leo said nothing and only gestured towards his throat, asking for water. Faye rolled her eyes, however, fetched it for him at once. And it was only after he drank some and recovered that Leo began answering her question. The skill set is balanced for movement, creativity, and attack. However, I don't know a single defensive maneuver. If push comes to shove, I have no healing abilities or defensive moves that could save my life in a pinch, making my fighting style offensively skewed, Leo judged, as Faye nodded in agreement with his assessment. Glad you can see it now, because I already know what the previous you would have said when asked about it, Faye said, as she chuckled to herself as if reminiscing about an old joke. What? What would the old me say? Leo asked, his curiosity piqued, as Faye only chuckled louder looking at the clueless him. What else? The old you would say, defense is for losers who get hit. I'm the boss, I just don't get hit, Faye replied, as Leo once again frowned deeply. His previous self sounded like an enigma, and Leo could not even begin to imagine what sort of life he had lived to grow into such an arrogant prick. However, while it sounded impractical, he was also secretly impressed by his past arrogant self, as clearly it had somehow managed to become the best assassin on planet Earth. All right, your next class starts in 12 minutes. You better get a move on. Also, remember, you won't be able to use your skills instantly. Expect failures in the first few days. You need practice to return to your best, so don't bank on it for immediate fights. Also, if anyone asks, just tell them it was Instructor Faye who helped unlock some bits of my memory. However, don't tell them about the beanie, Faye instructed as she unlocked the biometric door once again and showed Leo the exit. I'm your caretaker here, Sky Shard, and while I'll help you as best I can, it's going to have to be you that does all the heavy lifting. You must show promise in combat, and you must place at the top of your class, because if you don't, all your sacrifices up till now will be for naught, Faye reminded, as she gave him one last good slap on his back before sending him on his way to the next class. As Leo stepped out of Faye's room, his hair slightly tousled and a subtle smirk lingering on his face, the last thing he expected was to run into Professor David. The professor was headed towards his dorm room after finishing his lecture, his expression neutral, until his gaze landed on Leo. Sky Shard, David's voice carried a note of surprise, his eyes flickering from Leo's disheveled appearance to the door he had just stepped out of. Leo could almost see the gears turning in the professor's mind, piecing together an entirely incorrect scenario. However, he met his gaze nonetheless. Professor, Leo said, as he walked past him, entirely ignoring the tension hanging in the air. But as he brushed past, he could swear he heard David curse under his breath. Leo didn't need to read minds to know what the professor was thinking. The man had clearly jumped to the worst conclusion possible, assuming that a teacher had offered him sexual favors in exchange for being acquainted with his monarch-level talent. It was ridiculous, unfounded, but Leo had neither the time nor the patience to care. With only 12 minutes before his next class, his focus was elsewhere. Returning to the practical combat arena, Leo walked with a renewed sense of confidence about himself. Although his conversation with Faye had not gone entirely as he hoped it would, in some ways, it had turned out better than he ever could have imagined. He now knew that his memory loss was something voluntary and not something imposed forcibly upon him. And although there was a possibility that Faye was lying and making things up, something about her demeanor and how she talked about his past self made Leo trust him. Today, having talked to her, Leo found out about his goal in this academy and his reason for coming here, and that alone felt much better than the confused state he found himself in up until yesterday. Up till yesterday, he had no clue why he was here, or who put him here, or what was his endgame. And although many of these questions still remain unanswered, at least now he knew his short-term goals. 1. He had to get stronger and somehow top the first-year rankings. 2. He had to be selected for the academy team, representing them in the circuits, and participate in that competition. 3. He had to shine at the circuits and hopefully help Rodova overturn Geneva's rank, as it would be an achievement big enough to be noticed by the universe's best assassin guild, the Black Serpents, which eventually brought him to his final goal for having joined this academy, which was finding a way into the Black Serpents. For now, he had no clue as to why he needed to join the Black Serpents, or why the only route to joining them had to go through the Rodova Military Academy. However, just having the knowledge of what he was supposed to do felt enough for now. Meanwhile, within the teacher's dorm room, Mu Yin Fei, aka Mu Fan, slumped against the wall devoid of all strength after Leo left her room. She had kept her act together and behaved all tough around him till she eventually pushed him out. However, the truth was she was absolutely exhausted. The mana required for the memory transfer was not something just anyone could handle. The process was actually supposed to take place in a specialized machine that was powered by several high-purity mana crystals. However, Mu Fan did it by hand for the sake of Leo. Stupid boy got all beat up today by Su Yang. Why does he pick fights he can't win? Doesn't he understand that his body is precious? Fei thought, as he cursed Leo's poor decision-making under her breath. Today, she had given him a sense of purpose and a goal to work towards. And while she had not given him all the answers he sought, she had pointed him in the right direction. You must enroll into the Black Serpent's Sky Shard, for if you don't, there is no hope for you to become the next timeless assassin, Fei murmured, as she weakly recalled the reason behind all this trouble. The reason behind Leo enrolling into Rodova Military Academy. The carefully crafted plan aimed at seamlessly helping him achieve what no one else before him had. The reason was quite embarrassing for the evil cult, for they were supposed to be the guardians of the ways of the timeless assassin, the protector of his legacy. However, it was because of their inadequacies that Leo had to take this difficult path today. The evil cult was meant to be the guardian of the timeless assassin's legacy, the preserver of his techniques, the gatekeeper of the knowledge that allowed a warrior to ascend beyond mortality. And yet they had failed. Their last hope, the strongest dragon candidate they had ever nurtured, a warrior who had once stood on the precipice of greatness, had fallen, killed not fighting a war of justice, nor by an unforeseen catastrophe, but by the guild master of the Black Serpents. That battle had been a turning point. Not only had the evil cult lost their most promising candidate, but the Black Serpents had taken from his corpse something invaluable, something that should have never left the hands of the cult. A divine rank skill scroll, a relic of the original timeless assassin, containing one of his core techniques, a move so crucial that without it, no successor could ever hope to become the next timeless assassin. It was a fatal bottleneck, a wall that could not be bypassed. No matter how much talent the next dragon possessed, no matter how deep their understanding of the timeless assassin's arts, they would never reach the pinnacle without that skill in their arsenal. And now, that scroll sat behind the most impenetrable defenses in the universe. The Black Serpent Guild was not just a collection of elite assassins. It was the universe's premier assassin guild, an organization that had solidified its place at the very top of the underworld hierarchy by having deep ties to all 6 great clans and the universal government. Their vaults were legendary, rumored to be guarded by an ever-changing security protocol, layers of spatial locks, and a force of assassins that had never known failure. And while over the years, the evil cult had launched dozens of attempts to retrieve what was stolen, every mission they launched had inevitably ended in disaster. Each infiltration team was wiped out. Every direct assault was crushed as the cult simply found no way in. Not through force, not through stealth, not through any method they had used before. Which meant that if they wanted to retrieve the skill scroll, if they wanted to see a new timeless assassin to rise again, they needed a new approach. One that would allow their agent to walk freely within the guild's walls. One that would not raise suspicion. One that would let them strike from within. But that was easier said than done. In a world where background checks ran deep, where major organizations conducted psychological evaluations and lie detection procedures on every new recruit, infiltrating the Black Serpents was impossible for anyone with even the slightest connection to the evil cult. Even a single hidden memory of the mission could be fatal, as no one could join that organization with fabricated pasts or forged documents, as the guild's security measures would expose them long before they ever got close to the armory, which left them with only one possible entry point: the grassroots level. Unlike other recruitment methods, the inter-school circuits were one of the few ways the Black Serpents scouted new talent without prior affiliation checks, as they expected the reputed academies to have already done that bit. Hence, those who dominated the circuits, those who stood out among the most promising young assassins in the universe, were offered a chance to join, making it the only way to join without triggering suspicion. And that was why Leo Skyshard had come to Rodova Military Academy. That was why he had erased his own memories. A clear background, a blank slate, no affiliations, no ties to the evil cult. A perfect candidate. This wasn't just about gaining strength. This was about building a cover story, about proving himself as an exceptional talent while operating within the Righteous Alliance framework, about ascending the ranks of the Academy without any traces of his true allegiance. Only after cementing himself as one of the best would he receive an invitation. Only after earning his way into the Black Serpents would he finally get his chance. Once inside, he would steal back what was rightfully his. And when that day came, when the scroll was back in their hands, he would return to the evil cult as their next dragon, the next candidate to become the timeless assassin. But until that day arrived, he could never know the full truth. For in this game of shadows, ignorance was both his greatest shield and his deadliest curse. As Leo stepped into the practical combat grounds once again, sporting a bruised face and a slightly swollen eye, his physical condition immediately became the center of everyone's attention. Whispers rippled through the training grounds as the elite class students tried to theorize what had happened to him. Since it was common knowledge that both he and Su Yang had been kicked out of Professor David's class, many assumed the two had clashed afterward, with Leo ending up on the losing end, while the others speculated that he had foolishly provoked a senior or an instructor which would be in line with his freakish personality. However, as if completely unaffected by the gossip around him, Leo stood tall. His posture was proud, his expression unshaken, as a subtle but unmistakable confidence radiated from him. The very air around him felt different now compared to just this morning, as he seemed to no longer fear the opinions of the students around him. With the knowledge of his combat techniques restored, something deep inside him had shifted. It was almost like a sliver of his natural arrogance, his brash, unshakable presence, was creeping back as his eyes looked at the surrounding students more as underlings rather than peers. The change was subtle, but significant. Just this morning, he stood amongst the class lineup in a spot where he would draw the least amount of eyes, with his shoulders slouched and his eyes gazing at something distant. It was almost like he subconsciously avoided eye contact, since he did not have the guts to pick a fight. But now, he stood tall, shoulders squared, meeting the stares of those who dared look at him, challenging them with nothing but his presence, as he turned into a full-blown menace. With his combat knowledge restored, he feared no one, and it reflected in his attitude, with Mu Ryan being one of the first ones to notice this change in him. Whoa. What the hell happened to you, big bro? Where did you suddenly pick up so much swagger from? She asked, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. However, Leo simply shrugged her away. I've always been this way. His voice came out deeper than expected, catching even him off guard. Mu Ryan narrowed her eyes. Nah, something definitely happened between Professor David's class and now. You feel way too overbearing for it to be nothing major. Her gaze flickered towards Su Yang, who stood off to the side, arms folded, a deep frown on his face. He, too, was staring at Leo, but with a hazy, confused expression that looked like it belonged to a disillusioned lover who had just had a messy breakup. And Mu Ryan followed his gaze and then gasped dramatically for maximum humor points. Yep, you and Su Yang just had sex after class. That's the theory I'm running with. My only question is... She paused for effect, smirking who was top. Leo let out an involuntary chuckle before pushing her away. Wicked. The little one definitely had a wicked sense of humor. And while Leo didn't dislike that about her, he found himself more alarmed by her uncanny ability to observe and discern things others would overlook. She had instantly pieced together that he might have ties to the Mu clan and had lost his memories, something that wasn't public knowledge. And now, with just a glance, she had noticed the shift in his demeanor before anyone else. That was dangerous. All right, class. I want pin-drop silence. A deep, commanding voice cut through the chatter as Major Hen stepped forward, taking the center stage. I am Major Hen Bespoke, and for the next 4 weeks, I will be your practical combat instructor. Unlike your regular classes, which are taught by fixed faculty, your practical combat training will be conducted by rotating military instructors. Each instructor will train you in different methodologies, ensuring that you receive a broad spectrum of combat exposure. My method of training is simple, which is that I want you to fight amongst each other as much as possible. I want you to face as many opponents as possible to gain first-hand knowledge of their fighting styles and learn how different types of warriors approach combat. No two swordsmen fight the same. No two assassins move alike. Facing dozens of different opponents daily will give you the experience necessary to determine the best strategies to counter a variety of fighters. Adaptability is key, and that is the foundation of my class. Here's how it will work. Each of you will be assigned a number. You will then rotate through matchups, facing every other number in this class at least once. Each fight will conclude in one of 3 ways. A tie if no decisive result is reached within 2.5 minutes. A win if you disarm or incapacitate your opponent. A loss if you are the one disarmed or incapacitated. Hen's tone remained firm and unwavering as he continued. Scoring will be simple. 0 points for a draw, -1 for a loss, +2 for a win. Once all of you have fought every opponent at least once, we will hold weekly leaderboard matchups every Sunday. The top 10 rankers will participate in an exhibition match, where the rest of the class will observe and learn. I will personally critique those matches, breaking down your mistakes, analyzing your movements, and teaching you how to improve. That will be the most informative part of this class. Hen's gaze swept over the crowd, his words laced with a deliberate intensity. If you have any intention of qualifying for the circuits as a first year, your performance in these leaderboard matches is critical. At the end of my 4 weeks, I will be submitting 3 names to Principal Auric, my personal recommendations for the circuits. And while my endorsement alone won't guarantee selection, it will carry significant weight in your candidacy. So, if you want to make a name for yourself in the military inter-academy circuits, if you want to be noticed by the strongest and most powerful organizations in the universe, fight like hell. Claw your way to every win you can get. Hen's fists clenched as he spoke, his voice carrying an unmistakable edge of challenge, an unspoken dare for them to rise to the occasion as he tried to rile up the heat within everyone's young blood. And it worked out well, for as Leo glanced around, he could see the shift in everyone's expressions. His fellow students' expressions had hardened. Determination. Hunger. Every single one of them wanted this. The circuits were the golden ticket. The one chance to be scouted and recruited by the universe's most elite forces. And if they had to fight, bleed, and break bones to earn a recommendation spot, then so be it. Sir, I Jianggu will be the one to get that recommendation, sir. Shouted a candidate, who declared his desire to win like a moron, which immediately painted him as a target for the rest of the class, and even pissed Leo off. Like hell you would. The mission requires me to qualify for the circuits, and if this recommendation can help me do so, then I'm not letting a single one of you pass me. Jianggu of the Gu clan? I'm going to break your bones when we meet in battle, Leo thought, as he coldly marked the loudmouth as a personal project. Leo Sky Shard. Number 1, Su Yang. Number 2, Mu Shun. Number 3. Major Hen's voice carried through the combat grounds as he assigned numbers to all students based on their enrollment ranks, keeping the process straightforward and without any unnecessary complications. The list continued until Hen reached the final number, and then, without a pause, he moved to the matchups. First flight, number 1 versus number 35, Zone 1. Number 2 versus number 34, Zone 2. He read, as he assigned everyone a combat partner at once. After hearing the number of his opponent, Leo's gaze shifted briefly. He had no idea who number 35 was, but his opponent clearly knew who he was. From among the crowd, a girl was already staring at him. Eventually, as Leo made eye contact with her, she began walking toward him at a casual pace, stretching her arm out to introduce herself. Hello. I'm Sophia Vin, and I will be your first opponent today, she said as Leo accepted the handshake but responded in a tone laced with detached arrogance. "You already know who I am," he said, as Sophia smiled at his remark, tilting her chin up ever so slightly, as if trying to meet his gaze on even ground. But it was nothing but a poor attempt at bravery, and unfortunately for her, Leo saw straight through it. She tried too hard to appear confident, although she was not feeling it. And while she somehow managed to maintain a straight face, the rest of her body betrayed her resolve. The tension in her shoulders, the slight imbalance in her stance, the way her fingers curled just a bit too tightly before she let go of the handshake, told Leo that she was very nervous to face him. Whether it was his reputation as the #1 student, or his freakish performance this morning while training that scared her, Leo had no clue. However, looking at her body language, he felt sure that she was indeed afraid to face him. Being scared of your opponent means you've already lost half the fight, Leo thought, as he purposefully bore his gaze down on her, trying to look even more imposing, as he tried his best to intimidate her even more. However, before he could properly pressure her, Major Hen's voice rang out once again, saving his opponent from unnecessary psychological pressure. "Listen up," Hen said, as all attention snapped back to him. "You will each participate in 5 consecutive matches before being allowed any rest. Once your match ends, you will rotate one zone to the left and take on your next opponent immediately. This will go on until you complete a total of 10 fights today." The weight of his words settled over the field. Each fight is a maximum of 2.5 minutes. If no decisive victory is reached, it will be ruled as a draw. There will be no breaks between rotations. Recover as you fight or fall behind. And the break after the 5th match will only be 10 minutes, where consumption of any potion is not allowed. A murmur rippled through the students, some whispering complaints, others barely concealing their frustration. However, Leo did neither. In fact, he welcomed the format with open arms. Fighting 5 opponents consecutively without rest would test his endurance, his sharpness, his ability to stay dominant under fatigue. And although it would be tough, he desperately wanted to know where his limits lay, which was why he was grateful to Han for pushing him in such a demanding regimen. "Assistants, take your positions," Han commanded at the end, as at his command, a squad of instructors stepped forward. Unlike the professors, these men and women were not mere educators. They were soldiers. Their role wasn't just a referee. They were here to enforce discipline, to observe, and to ensure the safety of all participants. Each assistant took command of a designated zone before calling out the cadets assigned to fight in their zone. Zone 1, number 1 and 35. A male assistant called, as Leo and Sophia answered his call, moving towards that particular fighting area. Beside them, Suyang took his own position in Zone 2, while Mushun was further left in Zone 3. The entire training ground had been divided into smaller battle zones, each outlined with thick white boundary lines. The space wasn't large, but it was just enough to engage in a close-range battle and to maneuver a few steps. It was designed in a way where running away or stalling for time became impossible, pushing cadets to go for wins rather than gambling for a tie. "Number 1, stop here. Number 35, go there," the assistant pointed as he assigned both Leo and Sophia a starting spot within the marked area. Standard combat rules apply to this fight. He began, as alternating his gaze between both cadets, he explained the rules once. Protective gear is mandatory. No strikes to vital organs. No maiming or crippling blows. Forced out of bounds equals a loss. Referee's decision is final. He explained as he handed Leo and Sophia their protective gear, which included light padding for the chest, forearms, and legs, along with a helmet, ensuring that both candidates had sufficient protection to prevent crippling injuries. Leo strapped his armor on without a second thought, completing the process quickly, while across from him, Sophia did the same, but took much longer. It looked like she took the extra time to make sure that she was padded up precisely and so that she did not get hit on her vitals, as she subconsciously seemed to be preparing herself for a crushing defeat and was only hoping to make it out of round 1 without any major injuries. Puffed, weakling Leo thought disappointedly, as although he could accept a weaker opponent losing to him in a fair fight, he He somehow had no sympathy for weak-minded warriors that threw the fight before it ever began. To become a warrior, one had to become a mentality monster first, and it looked like she did not have the mentality of a predator within her. Eventually, she did finish gearing up, as she looked up at Leo once again, this time with an unsure smirk on her lips. So, the famous Monarch-level talent is my first opponent. Unfortunately, you will lose your very first fight, she said, her voice cracking slightly, as the fear was evident on her face. Leo said nothing. He merely scoffed at her meek behavior before shaking his head, as the referee introduced the weapons tray. Coincidentally, both Leo and Sophia were assassins. However, while Leo chose to fight with daggers, Sophia preferred scythes as her weapon of choice. It was not the usual choice for an assassin. However, this was exactly what Hen wanted from this combat class, which was to expose students to all kinds of opponents. Swippy, swippy. Picking two of them up, Sophia spun the curved blade in her palms, before rubbing them against one another to produce small sparks, as she smiled in satisfaction. Apparently, holding a weapon in her hand finally gave her the courage to look Leo in the eye, who felt equally confident after gripping a pair of daggers in his palms. Fighters ready? The referee asked once both had chosen their weapons, as both Leo and Sophia nodded to show their approval. Begin, he declared, as Sophia charged at her command, only to be bamboozled when Leo disappeared before her very eyes within a split second. Begin. The moment Sophia heard the command, she sprang into action, charging straight toward Leo. She knew that if she did not seize control of the battle now, right when it had just begun, she might never get the chance to do it again later. Since Leo was the #1 ranked cadet in the elite class as per comprehensive evaluation, Sophia fully expected him to be faster and stronger than her. However, when she saw that he favored a dagger as his primary weapon of choice, she recognized an opportunity to potentially create an opening. Leo's daggers were barely 12 inches long, and when added to his arm reach, his maximum attack range reached about 46 inches. In contrast, her scythe measured 20 inches, and with her 30-inch arm reach, she had a peak attack range of 50 inches, a full 4 inches longer than her opponent's. This meant that she had a range advantage over him, which when coupled with her skill move, Accelerated Slash, might just give her the edge she needed to win. It was a very small difference, but in a fight like this, every inch counted. Okay, Sophia, you will go in and place a vertical slash, forcing him to dodge left. However, the moment he moves, you will activate the skill and take him by surprise. It's an opening sequence you have done countless times before, and maybe it can work on him too. Sophia thought, as she narrowed her gaze. However, before she could execute any of her thoughts, before she could even raise her scythe to attack him, Leo disappeared before her very eyes, without leaving so much of a trace in the air. What? Where'd he go? She wondered in panic as she looked to the left, then to the right, and finally over her head. She expected an attack to come flying in from any side at any time, as her senses went into hyperdrive. However, the expected attack never came. 1, 2, 3. 3 painful seconds passed, as sweat beads began to form on her forehead. She no longer had any sense of her opponent's movements, as having spun around thrice in these 3 seconds, she no longer knew where Leo was supposed to be. She had spun because she felt a constant fear of being stabbed at her back. However, no matter how many times she turned, she simply could not spot her opponent. Damn it! Where are you? She finally shouted in frustration, as at that moment, she felt someone suddenly swipe at her feet as she lost her balance and was brought to the floor with a sickening thud. Thud! At this point, Leo suddenly reappeared, a dagger pointed at her throat, as he ended the bout from start to finish in under 10 seconds. Please don't hurt me. Sophia's eyes conveyed this message, as they turned slightly teary and afraid. However, Leo did not care. For him, resisting the urge to plunge a dagger in her back and ending the fight without inflicting any major injury on his opponent was already mercy enough on his part, and he had no interest in showing any more. Work on the perception skill that Professor Powell distributed today. You need it a lot, Leo advised as he walked away, with the assistant declaring him to be the winner. Winner, plus 2 points, cadet number 1, the assistant announced, as he nodded in acknowledgement of Leo's skill, prompting Leo to nod back. Apparently, only 2 cadets had finished their fights within the first 10 seconds, and those 2 were him and Su Yang. As Leo looked across to his battle zone, he found Su Yang staring back at him, as a maniacal smile played out on his face. He said nothing. However, the excitement and the pure elation on his face conveyed the entire story of what he felt at this moment. Not bad, Sky Shard. Leo could almost hear his voice praising him in his head as he grinned back, folding his arms as he boldly made eye contact. Leo felt it too, the goosebumps crawling under his skin as he felt the growing urge to fight Su Yang yet again. Just a couple hours ago, he had been beaten black and blue by the guy. However, after getting his combat memories back, Leo felt his body itching for round 2, as he strongly felt that the outcome between their fight would be different if they were to clash again now. On a second thought, Leo realized that it might not be a great idea to jump into a rematch just yet, as although he executed the move, Vanish, perfectly in this fight, without facing any hiccups, there was still a chance he could face some challenges while trying to recreate some of his other moves. It was an odd sensation, for although Muiyin Fei had warned him that it would take a while for him to recall and perform his combat skills, Leo found himself capable of recreating Vanish on his first try, which immediately boosted his confidence. Initially, he felt jittery when he began circulating mana within his body to activate Vanish. However, once he started, it was almost like he did not even need to consciously think on what he was doing, as his brain completed the rest of the process automatically. It was almost like he had performed the move 1,000 times while training, and now he only needed to initiate the process before muscle memory took over and his body did the rest. And while he was not sure if this was the case for Vanish alone or for all his skills, he did not wish to fight Su Yang again until he found out. Just you wait, Su Yang. I'm going to return every hit you landed on my face tenfold in the coming days, Leo thought, as the grin on his face widened while staring Su Yang down. At this moment, both of them knew that Leo was on his way to regaining his peak battle form, and although he had some distance left to cover, both were genuinely stoked to see him on the path to quick improvement. All right, time's up. Everyone shifts one battle zone to their left. Number 1 will go to Zone 2. Number 2 will go to Zone 3. Number 34 will go to Zone 1. And number 35 will move to Zone 35-inch Major Hen, declared once the first 2.5 minutes were over, as everyone quickly shifted to the next battle zone, where they encountered their second opponent. Greetings, I'm Jianggu, and I shall be taking the top spot from you in the class rankings very soon, said Leo's second opponent, as Leo's eyes beamed with joy when he introduced himself. This was the same guy who had shouted boldly that he was going to win it all, when Major Hen was explaining the rules, and he had done the same once again when he introduced himself now. Ag, so you're Jianggu, Leo said, as he pretended to have heard his name before. Yes, I'm Jianggu. Have you perhaps kept an eye on me as a rival? He asked, his eyes shining brightly as he took his battle stance. Yes, let me be honest, Jianggu. I must tell you precisely how I feel about you before we fight, Leo began, as he drew in his opponent's curiosity with his words. The truth is, I don't give a fuck about you, Myung Chu, Leo said, deliberately pronouncing his name wrong, as the expression in his eyes turned stone cold. Begin, the referee announced at that moment, as it was Leo this time who took the initiative to charge first. The moment the referee's hand dropped to signal the start of the match, Leo immediately exploded forward, a menacing glare in his eyes. Whoosh! Jianggu barely had time to react before Leo was already on him. Leo didn't use any fancy techniques for this fight, not because he did not have confidence in performing them, but simply because he did not need to. His combat knowledge and experience ran deeper than just skill moves and weapons mastery, as his battle IQ was quite high too. At his best, he did not need to rely on any fancy moves to defeat his opponent, as more likely than not, he could usually read them like an open book. Not today. Jianggu declared as he saw Liu descending upon him from the top, as he swung his sword in a quick, practiced arc, activating a mana-infused slash aimed straight at Liu's ribs. But Liu read it like an open book. He didn't dodge. He didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned back while in midair and calmly stepped on his opponent's sword, mid-slash, to perform a backflip. What? Jianggu mouthed in disbelief, as his brain could not comprehend the sheer reflexes needed to time a backflip off an ongoing sword slash. However, that momentary distraction became his undoing, as Liu landed a blow to the top of his head before landing. "Guh," Jianggu said dazedly, as his vision doubled and his balance became shaky. "Where?" He mouthed in confusion, swinging his sword wildly, as he could not locate Liu in his dazed state. "I'm right here, you bum," Liu said, as he tapped on his shoulders lightly, only for Jianggu to turn with a panic, as Liu punched him square on the nose. Bam! Jianggu staggered back, his nose bone broken by the blow, as a steady stream of blood began trickling down his face. "Ouch! Ouch! Aw!" he screamed, clutching his nose with his free hand, as once again he took his eyes off Liu, giving him the chance to go on the offensive yet again. His next strike came instantly, a sweeping backhand across Jianggu's jaw, as he floored him to the ground. Thud! Jianggu laid flat on the ground, his brain a concussed mess, as he simply could not make sense of the world around him anymore. Stomp! Stomping ruthlessly on his face, Liu kicked his broken nose again and again, disfiguring it completely, until the referee forcibly stepped in to stop the fight and protect Cadet's safety. "Fight over. Winner, Cadet number 1, plus 2 points," he declared, as it was only then that Liu walked away from Jianggu, but not before spitting on the ground beside his face. "New number 1, my ass," Liu scoffed, turning his back on Jianggu and walking away, making sure the humiliation of this defeat would burn itself into his opponent's memory. In a way, Jianggu was extremely lucky. Lucky that the academy had rules. Lucky that Liu had been forced to hold himself back. For if it weren't for the academy's restrictions, Liu knew in his heart that Jianggu would not have walked away from this fight. He would have crawled. And the worst part? Liu understood now that he would not have felt a shred of guilt, even if he did go that far. For all his earlier doubts about himself, about his true nature, about who he was before he lost his memory, the answer was now becoming clearer to him with every passing moment. Deep down, Liu knew the truth. It was like a reflection that had been staring back at him from the start. However, he was just not ready back then to acknowledge it. However, he felt like he was ready to embrace it now. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't some noble warrior. At his core, he was a killer, cold, calculating, and merciless toward anything that annoyed him. But he wasn't a mindless murderer. He did not kill simply for pleasure, nor did he crave destruction for its own sake. But patience? Mercy? He had very little of that to spare, especially against people that he disliked or had no attachment to. And it was surprising how hard it was for him to be attached to anyone, as although Mu Ryan was a sort of friend for him now, whose company he did not dislike, he still had no question in his mind that if tomorrow he somehow found himself facing Mu Ryan in a fight where only one of them could walk away, he would kill her without hesitation, and he wouldn't lose a wink of sleep over it. He simply did not care for her enough to care about her life or death, and although the very thought of killing an acquaintance should have unsettled him, if he were frank to himself, it didn't. If anything, it comforted him instead, as a dark corner of his brain told him to be proud of this non-attachment, for it made him a harder target to go after. However, on the other hand, the logical part of him recognized that this level of detachment, this raw, unwavering ruthlessness was probably not a good thing. Sympathy, compassion, and empathy, those are the things that made a human, human. They were what separated men from monsters, what differentiated warriors from beasts. But the more Liu thought about it, the harder it became to convince himself that he should care. Because the truth was he didn't. There was no guilt, no hesitation about his nature in his head anymore, and instead of questioning it, he embraced it. Why should he feel apologetic for his nature? He was a hunter, not prey. A predator, not some weak, bleeding heart fool pretending to be something he wasn't. And the more he came to terms with that, the more he liked it. He wasn't even back to his peak yet. He had no grand achievements to boast about, no towering reputation to lean on. Yet still, he found his natural arrogance slowly creeping back. Not because of what he had done and accomplished already in the academy, but because of what he knew he could do. Damn, I guess I finally understand why Muiyin Fei called my previous self impossibly arrogant. The boss. That name sounded cringe to me when I first heard it, but I low-key like it now. I definitely feel like the boss, with my combat instincts back, and if I feel this better with just my combat memories back, just how would I really feel when I had all my memories back? Leo wondered, as he clutched his palm into a fist and stared at it with passion. Thump, thump. The thumping pulse in his veins was demanding that he fight more. The joy of humiliating his opponents. He wanted to feel it more. The elation of stomping an opponent's nose out. He wanted to feel it more. God damn it. How long before the next fight starts? I'm already tired of looking at this bum's face, Leo said impatiently, as the referee kept looking at his clock, waiting for the timer to hit 0 before he gave the command to switch. Leo tore through the next few fights with ease, overwhelming his opponents with sheer dominance. He did not need to use any flashy techniques or skill moves. In fact, he did not even consider using them after the second fight. Not because he did not want to test out his newly recalled skill moves, but simply because he found his opponents to not be at his level. His opponents were skilled and strong. Yes, and the gap between them was not in terms of raw power. In fact, most of the students of the elite class were at par with him in terms of speed, strength, and endurance, with some even being stronger in a few areas. But the difference in their understanding of combat, that was a chasm the students in this class could not hope to cross in a short time. Leo had a sea of combat information in his brain, experience so deep and rich that gave him a way out of almost any perceivable combat situation at this level, which was in stark contrast to most of his opponents, who were young elites, raised in noble families, that were, although groomed through rigorous physical training regimens since childhood, still lacked knowledge of actual practical combat. They had sparring experience, polished techniques, and textbook perfect form, but they had never fought for their lives. And it showed. Their movements, while technically sound, lacked killer instinct. They still treated combat like a sparring match. Measured, predictable, hesitant. None of them knew how to properly leverage their weapon advantage, like a proper seasoned warrior should. Leo used daggers, the shortest melee weapon on the battlefield. Hence, by all logic, his opponents, wielding longer swords and polearms, should have had the reach advantage. But they had no idea how to press that advantage, for they lacked the fundamental understanding of how human anatomy worked and what exactly was the most lethal range of their weapons. Every weapon had a kill zone, the area where it could dish out the maximum damage, and it was fundamental for a warrior to fight and hold their opponent within this kill zone so that at any opening shown, they could move in for the kill. However, the noble-borns did not understand this concept as well as Leo did. And while Leo did not remember his teacher, nor did he recall what kind of life he had lived up until now to possess such a deep understanding of combat, he still understood how to render his opponent's range advantage useless. He knew that if he slipped past their guard and fought at extreme, close range, separated by no more than half an arm's length, their ranged weapons turned powerless. The human elbow cannot bend backward, making a sword useless at that range, simply because one did not have enough space to swing it with any real force that could produce damage. And Leo gave them no space. He stuck to them like a shadow, fighting in such tight quarters that their own weapons became a liability. Meanwhile, his daggers, small, compact, and designed for close-quarters combat, became instruments of pure destruction. It was a simple trick, basic, but for these pampered nobles who had never fought in real battle, it was an unsolvable puzzle. They didn't know how to create distance. They didn't know how to reset the fight and regain control. And because of that, they lost. Every single one. 1 hour later. An hour later, Leo defeated his 10th and final opponent without so much as breaking a sweat, as he became one of only 4 students in the class to complete the day with an unbeaten record alongside Su Yang, Mu Shun, and Tivo Dracos. To be fair, he had only faced the lower percentile of the elite class today, with his matchups being the easiest ones on paper. However, completing the day with an unbeaten record still did well to cement his legacy as one of this year's strongest students, as if anyone had any lingering doubts about his true potential, they no longer possessed those ideas anymore. Fuck, look at Skyshard, he's not even breathing heavy. He's completely fine after winning 10 fights. There's not a bead of sweat on his forehead, nor a scratch on his body. Even Su Yang has a scratch on his face, but Skyshard is untouched. Freak. Skyshard is a goddamn freak. I faced him in combat for my 7th fight, and he completely outclassed me without ever needing to activate a single skill. Fighting him felt like fighting an immovable wall. He's a true freak unlike anything I have ever seen before. Murmurs began to spread around the class regarding Leo's performance in this first class, as looking around, there was not a single student who had managed to come out of this class unscathed, except for him. Most of the students had suffered significant injuries. Broken bones, bruised ribs, dislocated joints, swollen eyes. However, even those who were good at defense and did not pick up any major injury looked to be completely exhausted after 10 fights, as they found themselves collapsed on the floor, their chest heaving heavily, while Leo stood tall, unbothered. Unlike these fools who went all out in every fight and expended every bit of mana in their bodies, Leo never went all out, nor did he use too many skills, as he fought the fights with his brain and conserved most of his energy by not performing any useless movements. He felt like he could easily go for an hour more before his breathing became unsteady, as just this much action was not enough to tickle his bones. All right, class, that's it for today. I hope you have gained a lot of new insights by facing your fellow classmates today. We will repeat this process tomorrow, day after, and the day after tomorrow as well, before holding a Rankers exhibition match on Sunday. If you think your performance today was not up to the mark, then I suggest that before you go to bed today, you think about your fights, how they played out, and what you could have done differently to avoid a defeat. Introspection is the most important aspect for improvement, but it's not something that can be taught and only something that can be experienced through enlightenment. Anyways, that's it for you all today. Dismissed, Major Hen said, as he turned on his heel and walked out of the practical combat grounds, leaving the students rolling on the floor to their own devices. Big brother, you're on fire today. I never knew you could move like that, Mu Ryan said, as soon as the class ended, as she immediately rushed beside Leo and grabbed him by the arm. You're going to face me tomorrow. Please go easy on me. I don't want a bruised cheek, she said while pouting, as she tried to appear cute and appeal for leniency. If you don't want to end up with a bruised face, then just throw your weapon to the ground as soon as the match starts, declaring a forfeit. If not, then don't blame me for what comes next, Leo replied amusedly, as he gave her the evil side eye. Mean. Big brother is a meanie, Mu Ryan complained as she feebly hit him on his arms, causing Leo to burst out in laughter. An interaction that did not go unnoticed by the class. The final class of the day after practical combat was Scouting, Movement, and Planning, an assassin branch exclusive course that Leo had to take alongside regular class students. It was a 90% theoretical lecture with a few practical demonstrations conducted by Army specialists. Nothing too physically demanding, which was a relief, considering that nearly everyone who arrived for the lecture looked half dead after enduring the first day of hellish training at the Rodova Military Academy. On the first day, the lieutenant conducting the class outlined the importance of mission planning and introduced 3 core rules that every assassin had to follow when preparing for an operation. 1. Scout. 2. Verify. 3. Plan. The first thumb rule, scouting, was the foundation of every mission. Before an assassin ever lifted a blade, before a single step was taken toward the target, scouting had to be done. A poorly scouted mission was a mission doomed to fail. The more an assassin knew about their target, their habits, routines, security measures, and the layout of their environment, the less room there was for unexpected surprises. Scouting was not just about watching a target from the shadows. It was about gathering every possible detail that could be used to ensure success. How many guards were stationed at a given time? Did the target have a predictable schedule? Were there alternative exits if the main escape route was blocked? What terrain or structures could be used to an assassin's advantage? These are questions that needed clear answers before any plan could be formed. A well-protected target required a different approach than one who was careless. A target surrounded by political figures demanded stealth, whereas an enemy general on the battlefield could be eliminated more aggressively. Every mission had unique variables, but those variables meant nothing if they weren't accounted for before execution, which was why scouting wasn't just a task. It was a mandatory step in mission planning. An assassin who scouted properly entered every battle already holding the advantage, and an assassin who didn't walked into the unknown, blind, and vulnerable. The next part was to verify the information they had obtained and ensure that they were not being purposefully deceived by the enemy through misinformation or planted intel. This was the stage where an assassin had to question everything they saw, every bit of intelligence they gathered, and every assumption they made, because the smallest overlooked detail could turn a perfect plan into a disaster. What if the guards they had been tracking were only decoys meant to mislead intruders? What if the secret passage they uncovered was, in fact, a trap designed to funnel intruders into an ambush? What if the unguarded window was left open deliberately to lure them into a kill zone? A skilled enemy knew that assassins and scouts relied on information. The smartest ones used that against them. Because of this, verification was a non-negotiable step. An assassin had to cross-check everything. Observe a target's behavior on different days at different times. Note variations in security routines, not just on regular days, but also on high-alert situations. If an opportunity seemed too easy, it probably was a trap, and hence the class was given a simple phrase to memorize. Misinformation is deadlier than ignorance, because an assassin who went into a mission without information had a chance. But an assassin who went in with false information was already dead. Once information had been gathered and verified, the final step was creating a plan. However, a good plan was never just one plan. The lieutenant stressed that having a single strategy was a rookie mistake. An assassin needed to operate with at least 3 plans at all times. 1. The primary plan, the optimal, cleanest method of execution. If everything went as expected, this was the plan that would be followed. 2. The contingency plan, a backup method that accounted for unexpected variables. If a guard patrol changed, if a security system was upgraded, or if the target moved unexpectedly, the assassin needed a second option ready to be deployed. 3. The escape plan. No matter how well-planned a mission was, extraction was just as important as execution. If an assassin eliminated a target but was caught or killed during escape, the mission was a failure. A proper plan included multiple exit routes, disguises, or diversions. There was no such thing as a perfect mission. There were only well-prepared assassins. As the lecture concluded, most of the cadets sat up, paying full attention. Despite their exhaustion, they understood the weight of what was being taught. This wasn't just textbook theory. It was knowledge forged from real missions, real deaths, real failures. And Leo appreciated it too. Having an escape route plan beforehand and being cautious was probably a smart strategy that his arrogant ass needed to learn, as just like the lieutenant said, there was no perfectly executed missions, just prepared assassins that had thought about every possibility that could unfold. Hence, by the end, Leo stood up thoroughly satisfied with what he had learned for the day as he hauled his tired rear to the mess hall for dinner, with a grumbling Moo Ryan by his side. "Oh my God, Leo, everything hurts," she complained as she clutched her head. "My head hurts, my body hurts, my butt hurts. I don't even know how a butt can hurt, but mine hurts after all these long hours of sitting. And it's only the first day. The hellish Professor Marvin expects us to come in early tomorrow and run more laps as penalty for failing his expectations today. And this hell will just continue all over again tomorrow morning. And this is all if I retire to bed now, but I can't. I still have to spend a few hours meditating. Then I have to work on the scroll given in the basics of perception class, and also prepare for the next lecture of Professor David by studying his lecture notes today. I then have to introspect my combat performance like Major Hand wanted, and I have to sleep and recover my tired body too. It's like there's not enough hours on the clock for me to do all that and still remain sane, because I'm going to either fail one of the courses or I'm going to go insane. Ryan complained as she stomped her feet in frustration like a spoiled baby. It's not all that bad. You can grab a couple extra stamina potions during dinner. It will help you stay awake longer, Leo comforted, as although he too felt like the academy life here was a lot more grueling than he expected, he was somehow fine with it. Deep down, he understood that getting stronger was not supposed to be an easy process, because if it were, then every bum in the universe would be naturally powerful. Becoming strong was hard and required sacrifice, which was why the strong were universally respected, as not everyone could become what they were. Chatter, chatter. As Leo entered the mess hall for dinner, he found the place entirely full with hardly any seats left. However, to his surprise, the corner table which he usually sat at had a few empty seats left with Su Yang and Mu Shun sitting together on it, looking like they were saving it for him. As he walked in, Mu Shun immediately waved towards him to grab his attention, as Leo chuckled at this unexpected development. He had not expected to make allies in the academy, at least not this quickly, but now it looked like he was going to be in a power block with the two best students in the class. As Leo and Mu Ryan took their seats after filling their plates, the atmosphere at the table turned unexpectedly tense. The three strongest cadets in the elite class, Leo, Su Yang, and Mu Shun, sat in silence, locking eyes in an unspoken battle of wills. The rest of the mess hall immediately took notice. Whispers spread like wildfire, speculating on what it meant that the strongest students had aligned themselves together. Man, my shoulders hurt. Mu Shun finally broke the silence, rotating his shoulder blades with a wince. Punched a damn shield with my bare fist today. My knuckles are fine, but my shoulder feels like it's falling apart. What a drag. Su Yang scoffed, running a hand over the thin cut on his cheek. TCH, I can't believe I let some bastard land a hit on me. His fingers traced the wound with irritation. Little shit spat poison mist in my eyes. Blinded me for just a second, and that was enough. Mu Shun smirked. Damn, even you got caught slipping? Su Yang's jaw clenched. Next time, I'm breaking his ribs. No, screw that. I'm shattering them. His tone was casual, but Leo could tell he meant every word. What about you, Sky Shard? How'd you get the black eye? Mu Shun asked, finally turning to Leo. Leo only chuckled, casually pointing towards Su Yang. Mu Shun blinked. Su Yang frowned. It's nothing. It wasn't a fair fight. I cheap shot Sky Shard this time, but I got a feeling that next time, it won't be the same. Leo's grin widened at that response. Su Yang could have bragged. He could have rubbed in the fact that he had beaten Leo black and blue that morning. But he didn't. Instead, he chose not to consider that fight as legitimate, because Leo had been without his memories. That small gesture earned Su Yang some respect in Leo's book. As for all his arrogance, it seemed like Su Yang still had his own sense of honor. Well, Mu Shun mused, alternating his gaze between the two of them. Now that's a fight I really want to see. He turned back to his food, but the conversation was far from over. The fight between the three of you is going to change every week, Mu Ryan added, chewing thoughtfully. Depends on how your genetic awakening goes and what skills you unlock. Leo's ears perked up at that. When does that happen? We got tested for our genetic potential, but when do we start awakening it? Before Mu Ryan could answer, Su Yang spoke first. Next week. You get your first shot this Sunday. Depending on how fast you digest it, you will get another shot every subsequent week, or once you've fully absorbed the previous dose, whichever takes longer. He took a sip of water before continuing. Commoners only get one full dose genetic awakening, which is far less effective. Su Yang glanced at Leo, knowing he might lack the full context, so he took the time to break it down. Through extensive research, we found that the best way to maximize the genetic awakening serum's effects is to take it in small, controlled doses over a year, while coupling it with intense physical training. The more you train, the faster you digest the serum, and the better your results. He glanced around the mess hall, his expression darkening. The whiners in our class bitching about the academy's hellish training don't get it. They don't realize this training is the only way to draw out the maximum potential in our genes. He leaned back in his seat and met Leo's gaze. So, if at any point you feel like the academy isn't pushing you to your limits, start training more on your own, Sky Shard, because it's going to be more important than you think. Leo nodded in understanding. He didn't need to be convinced to push his limits. Becoming strong was his obsession. With or without his memories, he knew that he wanted to become as strong as he physically could and would do anything to get to that limit, no matter how much sacrifice and hard work he needed to get there. Also, don't forget, Mu Shun added, the higher your genetic potential, the greater your chances of experiencing ghost sleep. The moment the words left his mouth, Su Yang visibly tensed. A subtle, involuntary tremor ran through his fingers, and Leo caught the reaction immediately. Ghost sleep? Leo asked, curious. What's that? Mu Shun turned to him with a weird look. You don't know? He let out a laugh. Sky Shard, how can you not know ghost sleep? Your father or mother must have told you about it countless times growing up. Leo didn't react, only blinking at him in confusion. Mu Shun kept laughing. Hell, it's practically all the old geezers in our families ever talk about. But when Leo still didn't respond, the laughter slowly died, and Su Yang took over. Ghost sleep is when you tap into the memories of your ancestors, Sky Shard. He said it plainly, but there was something grim in his voice. It happens after you take the genetic awakening serum. You don't know exactly when it will happen, but occasionally after you take the serum, you will find yourself slipping into a state called ghost sleep at night, where you start witnessing past events from your bloodline, events that left a deep imprint on its history. Su Yang's gaze darkened. These memories are almost always tied to extreme emotions, either immense joy or overwhelming hatred. He exhaled sharply before adding, but in the history of the 6 great clans, I've never heard of a ghost sleep filled with joy. Not even once. Leo didn't speak, letting him continue. For us, it's always something brutal. A gruesome assassination. A massacre. Or worse. Su Yang's fingers clenched against the table. Watching your entire family being raped and slaughtered before your eyes. A heavy silence fell over the table. Leo didn't move, didn't react outwardly, but he absorbed every word. The likelihood of experiencing ghost sleep depends on how much of the progenitor god's blood runs in your veins, Su Yang continued. The weaker your divine blood, the less frequently it happens. He met Leo's gaze. But if you have thick blood, like we do, it's unavoidable, he said as he paused. We're bound to experience it, maybe once or twice a month, he said, concluding his speech as he trembled once again. Leo finally noticed it. Both Mu Shun and Su Yang, 2 of the strongest cadets in the class, looked physically afraid of ghost sleep, as both of them had goosebumps just thinking about it. These 2 men, who did not flinch at the sight of blood or physical pain, trembled at the thought of these nightmares, which just went to prove how horrible they must be. Ghost sleep. Leo had no memories of it. But if these 2, as powerful as they were, feared it to this extent, then whatever it was, whatever they were destined to see in his dreams, was surely going to be hell. Gosh, let's not talk about these depressing topics. It's literally killing my appetite, guys, Mu Ryan said, trying to pull back the conversation to a more cheerful note, as the boys unanimously agreed to her suggestion. After dinner, Leo returned straight to his room, his mind set on a single goal, starting his meditation practice. Now that he had regained his knowledge of how to circulate mana within his body, Leo was eager to dive into meditation. He understood that it was one of the most crucial aspects of a warrior's path and a key to unlocking the next stage of his power. Before dinner today, he had no idea as to how important meditation was versus learning new skills. However, after listening to Mu Shun and Su Yang talk about their plans for the rest of the day after dinner, Leo got a pretty good idea about its importance. Mu Shun and Su Yang, mentioned over dinner that they intended to meditate until midnight, followed by an hour dedicated to learning the perception skill scroll they'd been given earlier. And only then would they call a night. It was currently 7 p.m., meaning that the two of them planned to spend at least 5 hours meditating versus only one to learn a new skill, which was an eye-opener for Leo. Having friends, or at least fellow cadets with more general knowledge in the academy, gave Leo some much-needed context about how he should manage his time, which came as a significant relief considering how clueless he felt without his memories. Hence, after returning to his dorm, the first thing that Leo did was to grab his holographic copy of the meditation manual, sitting cross-legged on the floor before diving right in. Please condense a ball of mana in the center of your left palm. The manual instructed as it began floating automatically into the air, hovering right before Leo's eyes, with the text written within beginning to glow with a faint light. "Oh, okay," Leo muttered, feeling surprised as he did as instructed and condensed a ball of mana in the center of his left palm. "Insufficient mana density detected. Please pack more mana into the current ball." The text inside the book shifted, as it seemed to track Leo's progress in real time. "Oh, a live book? That's interesting," Leo mused as he condensed even more mana into the same spot, until the insufficient mana density warning dispersed, shifting into an anatomical diagram of his body and the mana circuits within his body. "Please circulate the condensed ball of mana exactly as displayed in the path in front of you." The book instructed, as it showed the exact path Leo was meant to follow, whereby he would circulate the ball of mana from his left palm up to his heart, and then down towards his navel, where the diagram wanted him to stop. As a whole, it looked simple. However, in reality, it was anything but simple. The roadmap of the mana circuits in his body looked exactly like the map of the various nerves distributed in his body, or the circulatory system that delivered blood and nutrients to every cell. There were millions of small mana pathways fracturing into individual cell blocks within his body, which eventually merged to form a larger mana path, and eventually several of these small pathways merged to form a proper major mana pathway that Leo usually used to activate skills. Hence, to move a large block of mana along a specific micro-mana pathway within his body was easier said than done, as at every slight mistake, the text before his eyes turned from blue to red, reading, "Wrong path taken. Please retrace all steps." Overall, it was an extremely tedious and time-consuming process to just transport a concentrated mana ball from his left palm to navel, and it took Leo a good 20 minutes of focusing his full attention to it, to do it correctly once. Please break the single large ball of mana into 2 equal parts, and control both balls of mana to reach the femur bone of your body, as shown in the diagram. The book instructed, as the simulation had displayed, now changed to showing how Leo must split the single mana ball into 2 and then control it down a specific pathway to reach both the femur bones of his body. "The hell," he cursed, as he understood that the difficulty of this step of the meditation process was twice as hard as the first one, as although the distance was shorter, controlling 2 balls of mana at once was significantly more difficult than controlling just one. However, with no other options, Leo began focusing on doing it correctly. However, always messed it up somehow, as he remained impossibly stuck on this step for the next full hour. Pant! By the 1.5-hour mark into starting his meditation, Leo found his brain throbbing in overexertion and pain as he quickly approached his limits. He had been using all his brain capacity nonstop for the past 90 minutes, focusing on an incredibly narrow and tedious process, and it took a significant toll on his mental health. "Fuck it, I need a break," he said, as he dispersed both balls of mana and laid back on his back, closing his eyes as the glowing meditation manual dimmed and lowered to the ground automatically. Throb. Every vein in his brain hurt from the overexertion, as even with his eyes closed, he could see the mana diagram floating before his eyes, asking him to guide it correctly again. "Meditation sucks. I would rather run 100 laps twice a day than do this shit," Leo cursed as he realized that meditation was a much harder process to undergo rather than physical training. However, while he cursed verbally, internally he did not feel frustrated at all. If anything, he was excited as he had never felt his brain challenged to such limits before. If meditation is this tough, and I do it daily, my brain is going to improve by leaps and bounds in the days to come. It's like exercise, but for my brain, and I'm sure the benefits it will bring will be massive, Leo thought, as he let a soft grin spread on his face. Deep breaths, inhaling and exhaling sharply. He waited until the throbbing sensation in his brain subsided before slowly getting back to his meditation position again with the crossed legs. Then, he opened the meditation manual again, which immediately floated back into the air, asking him to form a concentrated ball of mana in his left palm. This time, Leo got it right on the first try, before quickly guiding it to his navel in just 5 minutes, as he then proceeded to split them into equal parts as guided. Read new chapters at novel.com. Then, he once again found himself trying to guide both balls down towards his femur bone as instructed, which he began doing unsuccessfully for about half an hour, until he finally got the path memorized just right to precisely guide both balls down at a simultaneous pace, succeeding with this step of the training. Using the mana balls as a power core, charge up all the 121,776 micromana pathways leading to your bone marrow to begin the production of new blood cells. The manual instructed, as reading that text, Leo let out a sharp breath of disbelief. Leo exhaled sharply, his eyes scanning the glowing text before it shifted into an anatomical diagram. The complexity of what he had to do this time around was simply staggering. The diagram wanted him to activate hundreds of thousands of micropathways at once, which looked like a tree branch diverging into uncountable roots. However, instead of a trunk, all of them stemmed from the 2 mana balls he had painstakingly guided to his femur bones. It required a level of fine control that he had not yet mastered as a warrior. However, he had no other choice but to give it a shot regardless. Closing his eyes, he focused on the mana spheres embedded deep in his legs, and upon his command, they pulsed faintly, like miniature hearts awaiting further instructions. Carefully, he tried to push the energy stored within them outward, attempting to distribute the stored mana through the delicate channels branching into his femur. However, just as he started that process, he felt a sharp jolt of resistance surging through his body. Apparently, the mana flow stuttered, clogging at multiple junctures, as it found itself unable to disperse properly. It was like trying to force a flood through thin, fragile pipes, and his small mana circuits could clearly not handle that much load. Mana flow error detected. Improper distribution rate. Restarting process. The glowing text flashed red, and Leo clenched his jaw, suppressing a frustrated growl. He wasn't lacking the focus. It was just that his pathways weren't accustomed to this level of fine control, forcing him to be more careful. All right, I can do this if I am incredibly patient. I just need to be patient, Leo thought, as steadying his breathing, he tried again. This time, he adjusted his approach, visualizing the mana not as a torrent, but as a steady trickle, slowly seeping through the microscopic channels. He adopted a patient approach, waiting for mana to move forward on its own instead of forcing it to circulate, as he only applied the lightest of pressure. Oh yeah, that's the way to go, Leo muttered out loud in joy, as very soon he realized that this approach was indeed the right one, as the mana began reaching the marrow production site within the femur bones. Micromana pathways successfully charged, initiating bone marrow activation. A deep warmth spread through his femur, unlike anything he had ever felt before as the mana he sent and began to react with it. It wasn't pain, but it was something entirely foreign, as his body could sense something changing on a cellular level. Red blood cell production in femur bone marrow successfully altered. New blood cells are now being generated in place of standard red blood cells. His eyes flicked open as more text appeared, displaying a comparative diagram of standard human red blood cells versus the new ones forming within him. Normal red blood cells were small, disc-shaped, and functioned solely as oxygen carriers. But in contrast, the new blood cells were twice as large, capable of storing and transporting mana while also carrying twice as much oxygen to provide a completely superior alternative to the old cells. Holy shit. So this is what all this was about. Leo realized as he finally understood why this meditation manual not only improved the user's mana capacity, but also altered their body constitution. It was an amazing technique, but before Leo could celebrate the production of the new blood cells, another red alert message cut his excitement short. Warning: mana power core depleting. Estimated time remaining 50 seconds. The warmth in his femur bones flickered, the energy draining rapidly. His body was consuming the mana supply at an astonishing rate, fueling the transformation at an unsustainable pace, prompting the meditation manual to instruct him to find a replacement immediately. Leo gritted his teeth, already forming a new mana ball in his left palm, but his body resisted. His circuits were strained, his focus already taxed from the precision required in the last step, and hence, it became nearly impossible for him to circulate an entirely new batch of mana, while also maintaining the ongoing process without any mistakes. Unfortunately, this meant that in 50 seconds his power core ran out completely, pausing the production of new blood cells as the text before him updated yet again. Mana depleted. Restart required. Shit. Leo exhaled sharply. He had failed to get the next mana ball down in time, putting an end to the new cell production. Leo understood that ideally, he should have had the next batch of mana cores ready before the previous ones depleted, but doing so required an immense level of mental precision and discipline. And right now, he simply wasn't fast enough. For the next several minutes, he worked meticulously to repeat the process. He condensed another mana ball in his palm, ensuring its density was sufficient before guiding it back down the precise pathway he had memorized. However, despite his best efforts, he made a few minor mistakes guiding it down, and was forced to retrace his steps a couple times before achieving the desired result. Overall, 9 grueling minutes passed before he finally succeeded in splitting the energy into 2 and positioning them correctly in his femur bones again. But by then, all the previous progress had already halted and the window of efficiency was completely lost. Panting, he wiped the sweat from his brow and restarted the process of trickling mana to his femur bones, which once again restarted the production process of new blood cells. However, once again it was depleted within the minute, and Leo had to start from zero yet again. Fuck, this is hard, he realized, as just as he was about to restart the process, doing it all over again from step 0, the text before him shifted again, showing him an analysis chart. Optimal replacement efficiency data. Maintaining continuous flow for 2 hours per day, peak production rate. 100,000 new blood cells/day. If sustained for over 2 years, full blood replacement achieved. Breaks or inconsistent training equals efficiency drop, extending the process indefinitely. If sustained for 5 hours per day, full replacement may be achieved within 8 to 9 months. Leo's head tilted slightly as he read through the numbers. The process wasn't just difficult, it was a battle against time. If he failed to maintain a constant cycle, the replacement process would take years to complete, making it a terrible waste of time. Your journey continues with Novel Bin.com. The first thing he needed to do to practice this method efficiently was to learn how to maintain a constant power cycle, as without it, doing the same steps over and over again with delays in between was next to useless. The complete Marrow Meditation Manual aimed to reconstruct his body, one cell at a time, and to do so, the replacement rate of new cells produced had to outweigh the death plus production rate of old cells. If achieved successfully, the new blood cells didn't just enhance mana storage. They increased oxygen efficiency, improved muscle endurance, reduced lactic acid buildup, and optimized cardiovascular health, which meant that if he completed the transformation, he wouldn't just be a stronger fighter. He'd be something far beyond human limitations. But getting there was the real challenge. Right now, he was too slow. It had taken him 9 minutes to restart the process, and if he kept going at this pace, the replacement cycle would take forever to complete. This meant that not only did he have to get faster, he also needed to get more efficient and more precise, as only then could he hope to master this technique and complete the replacement rate within a reasonable time frame. At around 12:30 midnight, Leo finally gave up on meditation for the day after spending 5.5 frustrating hours making little to no progress. His head ached, his focus was strained, and his patience with the entire process had worn thin. So, instead of continuing down that fruitless path, he turned his attention to something new, the Absolute Vision Skill Scroll. A challenge, yes, but hopefully one that wasn't as painfully tedious as meditation. Or, the holographic scroll activated, flickering to life in the dim room, hovering before his eyes just as the meditation manual had. But unlike the silent hum of the meditation guide, this one made a low mechanical whirring sound, like an old, worn-out engine sputtering to life. Then, the first set of instructions appeared, glowing faintly. Mastering absolute vision requires mastering mana perception first. Until you can visualize the flow of mana around you with your eyes closed, it is fruitless to attempt this method. Leo exhaled sharply, closing his eyes without hesitation. And immediately, he felt it. The subtle pull of mana in the air, swirling in unseen currents. It wasn't visible, but it was there, an invisible tide that he was unconsciously drawing into his body, like a whirlpool slowly siphoning water from its surroundings. When he opened his eyes again, the warning label was gone. The text on the scroll had already updated, shifting to the next phase of instruction. Please circulate mana within your body, following the path in the diagram before you. The hologram shifted, revealing an anatomical diagram of the human body, tracing the specific mana circulation route he needed to follow. The path began near the base of his skull, running down his spine, branching through his legs, all the way to his toes, before looping back up in a continuous cycle. Unlike the meditation manual, which required distributing mana into delicate micro-pathways, this technique was far more straightforward. It didn't require complex branching, no intricate detours, just one clean, fluid cycle. 3 attempts. That's how long it took him to memorize the pattern. As after only 3 repetitions, he had engraved the process in a muscle memory, circulating the mana through his body smoothly and without error. Step complete. Please close your eyes and circulate the mana once more. Leo complied instantly, closing his eyes and performing the circulation from memory. He expected nothing different. Yet, continue reading on novel.com. The moment he completed the cycle, his world changed. A 3-dimensional map of his surroundings exploded into his mind. Not a blurry impression, not some vague awareness, but a detailed, spatially accurate reconstruction of the entire room. He could feel the outline of his bed, the slight unevenness of his desk, the soft ripple of the air as it brushed against his skin. The world around him had shifted, no longer defined by sight, but by pure perception. Whoa, 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 whoa. Leo staggered, nearly losing his balance. It was too real, too overwhelming. His brain struggled to process the sudden flood of information, adjusting to a completely new way of perceiving reality. For a brief moment, he wasn't using his eyes, yet he could still see everything. Congratulations, you have successfully mastered the first stage of absolute vision. You inherently understand the concept behind 3D imaging and have a robust subconscious brain capable of interpreting the information in real time. The skill scroll said, as Leo frowned deeply upon reading this. He felt perplexed as to why he could master such a difficult technique with such ease. However, apparently he already had an inherent understanding of how to sense mana around his body and a robust enough brain to compile the information he collected. The next step is to learn how to perform one circulation of this method with each breath that you take. The focus is on speed with precision. The skill scroll instructed, as Leo closed his eyes once again and took in a deep breath, trying to sync one cycle of mana rotation alongside it. However, as he tried to cycle the mana down the memorized path, he realized that he needed at least 3.5 seconds to complete one cycle, whereas the mental image created after each cycle lasted for only 1 second. This meant that if he wanted to learn how to maintain this skill continuously, he needed to shorten the mana circulation time from 3.5 seconds to on day 1, and then sync it with his breathing, so that his brain linked performing this method subconsciously with breathing, doing it every passing moment without Leo needing to focus on it. Sigh. Leo exhaled sharply, closing his eyes once more. Again, he pushed the mana through the path, forcing himself to move faster while maintaining the same precision. This time he improved very slightly, pushing his circulation time to 3.4 seconds, but it was still too slow. Again, he thought, as he hastened the process even more, repeating the circulation path, as he tried adjusting his control and trimming unnecessary hesitation. The result? He trimmed down his time to 3.2 seconds, which was a great improvement over 3.5, but still a far cry from where he needed to be. Leo exhaled, rubbing his temple as the strain on his mind began creeping in. A quick glance at the clock told him that it was 3 a.m. already, meaning that there was only 1.5 hour left before the morning alarms blared and the next academic day began. I need to take some rest. Pushing any more will only be counterproductive. I guess I will work on this again tomorrow, Leo concluded as he shut down the holographic scroll and climbed onto his bunk bed. I have a long way to go, Leo realized as at that thought his brain drifted asleep, shutting down in almost an instant after the exhaustion that it had undergone today. It was a challenge to learn both the meditation method and the perception skill simultaneously. However, Leo had faith in his ability to keep up regardless. Next morning at 4:30 a.m. sharp, the alarms in the corridors blared loudly, signaling the start of yet another academic day. Hearing the loud sound, Leo practically forced himself to wake up. However, his mind seemed to be reluctant to cooperate. Feeling as heavy as lead, Leo's brain resisted restarting, dragging him down into the depths of exhaustion. But with no other choice, he forced himself to power through it, pushing past the sluggish haze of sleep. Rodova Military Academy, physical training grounds. It wasn't until Leo was halfway through the 100 penalty laps, his feet pounding against the dirt alongside the rest of the class, that his brain finally shook off its grogginess. He hadn't wanted to wake up, but listening to Mushan's colorful morning rant made the ordeal almost worth it. Mark my words, boys. Mushan panted between heavy breaths. One of these days, I'm going to find a stick, a long, thick one, made of really hardwood with the nastiest, sharpest grooves and edges you can imagine. He exhaled sharply, his eyes burning with unholy determination. I'm going to oil it, kiss it, cherish it like it's my life's purpose. Leo raised a brow, already sensing where this was going. And then, when Marvin isn't looking, I'm going to ram it straight up his ass. Leo couldn't help it. He burst into laughter, shaking his head at Mushan's outrageously committed vendetta against Professor Marvin. Look at that smug bastard. He's smiling at our misery. Mushan growled, glaring up at Professor Marvin. Look at him, standing there all high and mighty, enjoying this shit. Following his gaze, the others turned to see Marvin watching over them with that ever-present calm, unreadable expression. Mushan scowled even harder. Experience? More on novel Bandcom. Fucker, he muttered under his breath, making sure the professor wasn't looking before throwing in the insult. Su Yang, arrogant as always, exhaled sharply. At least he did not make us wear the weighted vest today. The run's not nearly as bad without them. However, Leo rolled his eyes at that comment. Maybe it wasn't bad for them, but for him, it was already hell. Even without the added weight, 50 laps in, he could feel the exhaustion creeping in, his muscles aching, his breath growing heavier. But unlike yesterday, there was something different. At least today, he knew he could keep going for at least 30 laps more at the minimum, because his body did have the necessary strength to pull that off. And with Mushan's endless rants and Su Yang's calm determination beside him, he had hoped to cover the last 22, as he felt like maybe, just maybe, completing the 100 laps mark wasn't impossible today after all. Sky Shard, Shen, we must go faster. The bastard behind us are only a single lap behind. We must crush them every day in training, so they psychologically never dare to think they're equal to us, Su Yang said, as he increased the pace of his running slightly, much to the dismay of both Liu and Mushan. You crazy fucker. You need to tone down your obsession of stomping down the commoners. We are already a lap ahead of them. And unlike you, I have no interest in giving them psychological nightmares. Mushan complained, as he looked prepared to shove that same stick up Su Yang's ass that he wanted to shove up Marvin's. You have no vision, Mushan, and you don't have the qualities of a good leader in you. Skyshard understands me, which is why he is my rival, while you're just a friend, Su Yang replied, as both Mushan and Liu rolled their eyes at his words, before increasing their pace to match his. Just to be clear, I work solo. I don't want to lead no one, Liu said, as Mushan nodded in agreement. Skyshard has to be the most obnoxious and clueless individual I've ever seen. Did you see that hottie that came to chat with him this morning? One of the only two good-looking girls in the elite class. She invited Skyshard to run in a pack with her, even said it coquettishly while squeezing her boobs. However, Skyshard simply replied, sorry. I prefer to go solo, Mushan mimicked, as this time around Su Yang chuckled out loud. Did he really do that? Which one was it? Daryl? Or Geo? Su Yang asked, as Mushan immediately replied, Geo. That one's got a serious pair. I'm surprised you did not choose to run beside her. Skyshard, you could have seen quite the view of her balloons jiggling, Su Yang teased, as Liu's face darkened. If she approached either of us, I'm sure both of us would take the offer, but not Skyshard. Skyshard is a hard man. When his girlfriend asks him, honey, do you want me to blow you? Skyshard shakes his head and replies, sorry, I prefer to go solo. Mushan teased, as both him and Su Yang immediately burst into laughter, and burst into the uncontrollable kind, which completely messed up their cadence and their breathing patterns. Oh, shut up. I'm just a focus man. I'm focused on getting stronger and not on heavy balloons. Also, she's not that pretty anyways. Liu fought back. However, his words fell on flat ears. Su Yang and Mushan simply did not care for what he had to say, and kept laughing and expanding on the joke for the next 5 laps, as they pissed the shit out of Liu. However, because of how relaxed they ran, joking and laughing with one another, none of them felt the fatigue creeping in, which helped them get to lap 80 in a breeze. Look at those 3 at the front. They're laughing and running like they don't feel the pressure at all. They're 1.5 laps ahead from the rest of us, yet there's not a frown on their faces, noted a student from the rest of the class running pack, whose atmosphere was not as cheerful as Liu and company. In fact, in stark contrast to what Liu experienced with Su Yang and Mushan, the morale of the majority of the class pack was not flying high at all, as after every couple laps, one of them would drop out after complaining about feeling dizzy since the past 5 laps. Fuck the talented and fuck their friendship with one another. As if it's not bad enough that they're born with more natural talent than the rest of us. Now they're bonding over their talents too, as they laugh down on us. Talent doesn't determine your physical conditioning. If they can run 100 laps without breaking a sweat, then it means they've lived a life far more difficult than most of us can even imagine. They have trained for this. It wasn't given to them at birth. One sensible student amongst them spoke. However, his words only served as dampening the spirits of the others even more. It was bad enough to acknowledge that they did not have the same elite-level talent as the top students of the class. However, to also admit they did not work as hard as them on top really hurt their pride. I can't. I'm dropping. I can't run like those monsters. 100 laps are not for me, said yet another student as he crashed on the running track on the 97th lap, with just 3 more to go. It was a pitiful fall, one so close to the finish line. However, while he failed, Liu, Su Yang, and Mushan did not, as the trio managed to complete the 100th lap, while the majority of the class was still on 98th at the end. Professor Marvin showed no mercy to those who failed to complete the 100 laps run today as well. Apart from severely rebuking them and threatening to drop them from the elite class should they not make the cut soon enough, he also publicly humiliated them, asking them uncomfortable questions about their own mentality and will power. Those who failed to complete the 100 laps today will repeat the process tomorrow, while the rest of the class will move on to the next stage. Marvin informed, as rather than allowing them to move on, he coldly assigned them the same punishment for tomorrow, which was to run another 100 laps. Meanwhile, the students who succeeded were promoted to the next phase of training, weighted vest exercises. With only half an hour left before the session for the day ended, Marvin spared them from anything too strenuous for the day, assigning a brief round of push-ups and sit-ups before dismissing them. But as they left, he made one thing painfully clear. Enjoy today while you can. Tomorrow will not be this easy. Rodova Military Academy, Basics of Perception Class. With no mandatory attendance requirement until the next evaluation day, the Basics of Perception class saw a steep drop in numbers from the second session onwards. Less than 30% of the students showed up, and most weren't even here to actively train, as they simply came to consult Professor Powell on their personal struggles before leaving again. However, unlike the others who rushed to ask their questions and leave, Leo lingered for a while, quietly observing the class and taking in the struggles his peers faced before posing his own question. And what he saw surprised him. Nearly 90% of the students present were still stuck on the very first step, sensing mana. They couldn't even complete the preliminary phase of learning the technique. For these students, Professor Powell had to recommend special exercises and additional study guides just to help them grasp the basic ability to sense the mana around them. Leo, however, found himself completely unable to relate to their struggles. Mana perception had never been an issue for him. While his peers wrestled with fundamentals, he was already leagues ahead, despite being assigned the most complex version of the skill. His concern wasn't about how to activate the technique. He wanted to know how to make it faster. So when he finally raised his hand and asked Professor Powell for tips on accelerating mana circulation, the entire room fell silent. His question stood out like a sharp blade among dull stones. Even Powell raised a brow, scanning the room before his gaze settled on Leo. It was a clear and undeniable reminder of just how far ahead he already was. With a faint, knowing smile, Powell finally responded. Speed of circulation improves with practice, he began. Think of your mana circuits as a rocky road, full of shrubs, loose rocks, and slippery sand. At first, it's difficult to move across. The terrain slows you down. But the more you walk the same path, the more it changes. The shrubs get trampled. The loose rocks shift to the side. The sand is blown away. Step by step, that shaky road transforms into a highway. And once that happens, your speed naturally increases. Powell's tone was casual, but his words struck deep. It made perfect sense. Leo nodded, absorbing the lesson before thanking the professor and making his way out. If all it took was repetition, then that meant only one thing. He was guaranteed to crack the code, and it was only a matter of time. Rodova Military Academy, the second-floor library. After leaving the Basics of Perception class early, Leo joined Moo Ryan on the second-floor library to complete the homework that Professor David assigned all students in yesterday's class. Since the professor already had a vendetta against him, Leo did not wish to give him any fuel to kick him out again, and hence he sincerely completed the homework with Moo Ryan's help, and even studied for the coming lesson from the lecture guide manual. It was his intention today to not get kicked out and absorb whatever knowledge that he could regarding the basics of magic theory. However, he still felt unsure as to whether or not Professor David would let him sit within the class or not. Basics of Magic Theory class. After lunch, the Basics of Magic Theory class commenced. And the moment class began, David's first order of business was collecting the homework, immediately kicking out any student who had failed to complete it. Predictably, Su Yang was one of the casualties. Since he hadn't attended class the previous day, he hadn't even bothered doing the assignment, handing David the perfect excuse to kick him out yet again with a public bashing. However, when Leo stepped forward and submitted his completed work, something unexpected happened. David's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets in sheer frustration. The professor had clearly expected Leo to fail. He had likely prepared an entire lecture on sincerity and diligence, just waiting for Leo to show up empty-handed so he could publicly humiliate him. However, to his surprise, not only had Leo completed the assignment, but he had done it correctly, completely robbing David of his anticipated moment of triumph. The sheer displeasure on the man's face was almost comical for the class to witness. However, since the lecture had to go on anyways, David was forced to allow Leo a seat as he carried on with the lecture with his mood visibly soured. The topic for the day? Elemental infusion. As he explained the process through which pure mana could be altered to take on different elemental natures, such as fire mana, water mana, dark mana, and beyond. Stay tuned to Novel Being Calm. It was a very informative lecture, and although David was a groggy teacher, his knowledge and command on the subject was absolutely top-notch. The way he explained the topic opened Leo's horizons on how different types of infused mana could help increase the power of different types of spells, while also understanding how they could help a craftsman craft better quality items. Overall, he was very satisfied with what he learned for the day, as he decided to make this a habit and ensure that he gave the professor no excuses to kick him out from now on. Rodova Military Academy Practical Combat Class. After basics of magic theory, the next class was Practical Combat, where once again Major Hin matched up all students against one another, right from where they had left off the day before. Leo felt very excited for his matchups today. As compared to yesterday, the quality of his opponents went up significantly today, with the last two opponents that he faced even possessing some of the same skills that he did. The second last opponent that he faced executed a move similar to Shadowbind to try and restrict his movements, while the last one had a decoy clone move which created multiple illusions of himself, making it hard to perceive the real one. However, while he struggled more against them compared to the opponents he faced yesterday, Leo still managed to win all 10 matches that he fought today, while only picking up minimal injuries. The final class of the day after Practical Combat was Basics of Stealth and Assassination, the only lecture Leo had not attended even once yet, as it was only held on select few days, alternating with the Scouting, Movement, and Planning class. It was held in the basement, in a dark and damp environment, which felt unsettling. However, as if the environment was not bad enough, the instructor for this class was even worse. Unlike the other classes, which were led by seasoned military officials or scholarly instructors, this one was conducted by someone far removed from the chains of order and discipline. A criminal, one who stood before them in heavy restraints, his hands bound in reinforced shackles, his legs weighed down by enchanted chains. Yet none of it seemed to suppress the twisted glee dancing in his eyes. The instructor for this class was Severus Maximus, the infamous needle assassin, who Rodova Military Academy had specially recruited as a teacher to give their students the best education possible. Severus, however, was a man so dangerous that 2 high-ranking military lieutenants stood guard around him at all times, monitoring his every move, as despite his bounds, he could not be trusted alone around anyone. And yet, despite the chains and the guards monitoring his every move, the madness in Severus's eyes remained unaffected by his environment, as he looked at the students as if they were his prey, rather than his disciples. Kiki. A wheezing, almost inhuman cackle filled the air as he began his lesson, as his odd shrill voice sent goosebumps down the spines of many. "Hello, my little children," he cooed, his voice dripping with mock affection, his lips stretching into an unsettling grin. "I'm Severus Maximus, also known as the Needle Assassin." "Kikik," he said, as his shoulders trembled with thinly veiled excitement, as if just introducing himself was enough to send him into hysterics. "I'm here to be your teacher for this lovely, depraved little course, not because I have some deep desire to share my knowledge. Oh, no. His head twitched unnaturally as he leaned forward. "I'm here because it knocks precious years off my ridiculously long jail sentence. Keek. His laughter cracked through the air, echoing against the cold stone walls of the basement classroom, as it made many grown men break into cold sweats. Some looked visibly unsettled. Others were outright disturbed. But Leo? He didn't care. If a man was infamous enough to earn a moniker, then his knowledge was valuable. His mental instability? His history of crimes? None of that mattered to him, as he felt eager to learn. I'm sure you're all learning the theory of assassination in your fancy military lectures, honing your combat techniques in another class, practicing your little swings and stabs like good little soldiers. Severus's nose wrinkled in disdain, his shackles rattling as he gestured dramatically. Bah! Useless. Predictable. Basic. He scoffed. Anyone with a knife and a little muscle memory can stab someone. But that's not assassination. That's butchery. He grinned wickedly, his teeth flashing in the dimly lit room. What I'm going to teach you is real assassination, the kind that doesn't leave a trace. He hugged himself, his fingers twitching against his ribs, as if reliving some dark, delightful memory. The art of accidents. The art of making murders look like suicide. The art of staging a murder that looks like a lover's quarrel has gone terribly, terribly wrong. He exhaled shakily, laughing under his breath, his voice descending into an eerie whisper. How to make a father kill his own son in a drunken rage. How to make a priest die in prayer, a dagger lodged so perfectly in his throat it seems poetic. How to make a corpse look like it walked into its own death willingly. Keek. His laughter swelled again, breathless and delighted, his entire body trembling in sheer amusement as he made the students extremely uneasy. Some instinctively shifted away. Others dared not meet his gaze, fearful of the wild glint in his eyes, as even the lieutenants stationed beside him, who were armed to the teeth, seemed slightly uncomfortable in letting him continue with the lecture. However, since they were under orders, and he had not done anything to break the rules, they could only bide their time in silence for now. Today's lesson is about something simple, something delightful, something deadly. He licked his lips, dragging out the words. Poisons. I'll be teaching you how to kill with a whisper, how to end a life without ever raising a blade, how to twist the very breath in someone's lungs and make them die thinking it was a simple cold, Severus said, as he let out a content sigh, as if savoring the beauty of his own words. We'll go through types of poisons, their effects in assassination, how to brew them in the wild, and how to extract them from live creatures. But of course, this is all just for demonstration. Kikik. If you truly value your own life, you should always buy your poisons from a reputable vendor. His voice dropped to a sickeningly sweet whisper. Unless, of course, you wish to end up like some of my past students. He paused. Then, he threw his head back in laughter, the deranged, bone-chilling cackles filling the classroom once more. As the actual lesson began, let's start with something simple, yet effective, weaponized poison, Severus said, as he lifted a tiny vial containing an inky black substance, swirling it between his fingers. This here? A lovely little concoction called Viper's Fong. It kills instantly upon entering the bloodstream. A mere scratch, a single cut laced with this, and within 3 seconds, he snapped his fingers, the sharp sound echoing in the silent room. Dead. No antidote, no counter. Just dead. Severus chuckled, shaking his head. The best part? The corpse remains intact. No foam of the mouth. No violent spasms. Just a quiet, polite exit from the mortal realm. Continue your journey on novelben.com. With an eerie gentleness, he uncorked the vial and dipped the tip of a dagger into it, coating the blade in the viscous liquid. To make it, you simply need the venom glands of a six-toothed viper and the sap of a moonshade plant. The venom paralyzes, while the sap accelerates its spread through the body. A perfect combination. He licked his lips. One scratch, and the enemy won't even have time to realize they're already a corpse. The students swallowed hard, shifting uneasily as they realized just how deadly the knowledge being imparted was. But Severus wasn't done. His grin deepened as he reached for another vial, this one filled with a clear, colorless liquid. Now, if instant death is too uncreative for you, let me introduce something a bit more fun, Widow's Embrace. Unlike before, he handled this vial with reverence, almost affection, like a treasured possession. This little beauty is a delayed poison. odorless, tasteless, undetectable in food or drink. He tilted the vial, watching the liquid swirl. The victim consumes it, and for the next 22 hours, they feel nothing. Not a single symptom. No dizziness, no nausea, no warning signs. His voice dropped to a whisper. But then, the final 2 hours arrive. And that's when the fun begins. He sighed dramatically, placing a hand on his chest, as if overcome by the beauty of his own creation. The pain starts subtly at first, a slight burning in the stomach. Then it spreads. Within 10 minutes, it feels like their organs are liquefying. Their body overheats, their veins rupture, and their nerves set ablaze, and all they can do is scream. Severus chuckled darkly. Oh, and before you ask, no antidote. There is no cure to it after 20 hours when it's completely absorbed into the bloodstream. If detected early, you can use high-level healing magic to prevent it from taking effect and then slowly removing it. However, if the effects kick in, then by the time the prey realizes something is wrong, it's already too late to save them. His eyes flicked over the class, lingering on their expressions, some pale, others outright horrified. Now, who wants to learn how to make it? Silence. Then, reluctantly, a few hands rose. Leo, however, had already been taking notes as he raised his hand eagerly. Using poisons did not seem like his style, as he felt like he was more of a frontline no-nonsense fighter. However, having knowledge on the topic did not seem to be a bad thing either, as he absorbed every word coming out of Severus's mouth like a sponge. So far, this was turning out to be his favorite class yet, as although he was doing nothing but taking notes in this class, it was by far the most informative and practical of all the other theory subjects that he studied.